We're live, Chair.
Good. Welcome everybody to Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee, Thursday, the 15th of January, a 2 p.m. start. Welcome to everybody joining us, local members and also officers, and anybody viewing from the public at home. Quite a substantive agenda today with two rather large items, so we'll whizzle through as quick as we can. We'll take apologies for absence first. Apologies. I understand Councillor Claire Hall has given apologies. Any other apologies from councillors? We do have one or two councillors that are having difficulty getting in, but we made a start because we're quorate.
We've not had any more apologies from anybody from committee, but we've got apologies from cabinet members, Councillor Jake, Councillor Matthew, Councillor Glynn, Councillor Rafe, and I've received apologies from James Chappell, Chief Accountant for Capital, and we've also received apologies from Graham Taylor, who is the Chair of the Schools Funding Forum, but we will have Anwen Orrells, who is the Vice Chair for that item.
Thank you, and thanks to Anwen for stepping in there. It proves very useful for us, really, to be fair. Notes from Councillor Gareth in the chat, so we'll pick up on that he's running slightly late. Item 2 on you. Are there any other apologies that anybody knows of?
Oh, Chair, sorry for interrupting, but I have to leave at 3:30 for another
you.
meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Sandra. Thanks for joining us. Item 2 on your agenda is disclosures of interest. Just to receive any disclosure of interest by members. I don't think there will be any, but if there's anybody that has, please declare. And item 3 on your agenda, similarly, any declarations of party whip. Again, I'd be surprised if there are any, but there is an opportunity for anybody to declare if they wish so. Good. This takes us to item 4 on the agenda, to authorise the chair to sign the minutes of the previous meeting on the 18th of December 25. So just for accuracy, in the first instance, is there anything anybody has picked up in the minutes that would not allow me to sign them? No. And I can have a proposal and seconded that those minutes are proposed and seconded as per accuracy. Thank you very much. Yeah, I see hands up there. That's great. Any matters arising from the minutes that anybody wants to raise? There's an opportunity there.
Chair, you're mute, sorry.
Not sure what that has happened. I'm not sure how long I've been muted, but here we go. We're now into the substantive record of the meeting now, and there's a suggestion because ALN is linked to the funding formula and to the integrated business plan that we take item 7 on the agenda first. I'm open to committee suggestions on that. We've cleared it with officers.
You've gone mute again, Chair.
So, something's playing around with my IT. So if there's a suggestion that we take item 7 first, we will do so. But officers have been asked if this is okay, and they've cleared their diaries so that we, particularly Anwen, that we can do this. So is it your wish that we do item 7 first? Yay or nay?
Chair, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, okay, we'll take item 7 first, which is a review of the integrated business plan, to targets for additional learning aids, ALN. It's documented in your pack, and I'm going to go to Councillor James, portfolio holder for learning and skills or education, to just give us a brief introduction, and then we'll go over to Judith for a further introduction. I'm quite keen today because we've got two substantive agenda items that we're very concise in our question and that we don't become repetitive, and that's to members and officers as well. If I feel that we're overdoing a point, I'm going to be quite abrupt today and move on, because I think we've got an awful lot to deal with. So please bear that in mind, officers and members, please. So, Councillor James first.
Well, thank you, Chair. Right. So this paper, in a sense, it's half the story, because what we're missing as yet is the outcomes paper, which the intention was to present both at the same time, if you like, but unfortunately there's been a delay, and the data has only just come back in from Welsh Government. Verified data has only just come in from Welsh Government either today or yesterday, and therefore there hasn't been time to prepare the outcomes paper. So in a sense, you're only getting half the story. You're getting the strategy, if you like, and what the authority's been doing in this wave of ALM development, but it's an incomplete picture, which will be completed at your meeting in mid-February. I hope that's come to some explanation, and I'm sure that Judith or indeed Richard will be able to expand further on that. But I'll pass straight over to Judith, if that's all right.
That's fine, James. Thank you, Judith. We're in your hands.
Okay, prynhawn da pawb, diolch yn fawr. This paper today is really to provide Scrutiny with an update on our developments within the EAL Inclusion Department in line with the Integrated Business Plan. It isn't a line-by-line update against the IBP, but it's an overarching picture of updates according to that. So it starts with how we are improving our data in an intelligence, how we're gaining more intelligence on what is happening in our schools in order for us to be able to meet the needs of learners better. So with that aim in mind, we have produced a data profile for each school, which outlines a number of factors around their ALN demography. It captures the incidence of ALN, the levels and complexity of needs, so the IDPs, the local authority IDPs, the school IDPs, how that relates to attendance and exclusions in relation to ALN pupils, and I think CLAR pupils, and how this collectively, we can then build a picture across clusters about need and the different types of need. All of this information is gained from the Tyfu platform, where we store all of our information on our ALN learners. And our proposal is to update this termly because it's a moving picture in the ALN field, of course. That's what we've done. You can read the impact and the next steps of each action. We do now have a far clearer and consistent picture of ALN, and we've got evidence-based to challenge and to support schools around their ALN pictures. Our next steps is to share this both with the LIT team and in fact our schools, because I'm very aware that there's always a context behind data, and for us to get the best picture possible, we need the schools to contextualise this data picture. Moving on, we have upped our level of quality assurance this year against IDPs. So we're looking far more closely at each school's IDPs on a two-tier level, really. Do they comply with statutory requirements? And is there evidence of clear working of an IDP for individual learners? That allows us to have a robust overview of the quality of IDPs in the authority and how schools are meeting pupils' needs. And it also allows us to make sure that we're targeting funding in the right places. This process needs to be embedded moving forward so that we can ensure quality, equity and consistency of provision for all schools. Another big aspect of our work, according to the IBP, and a focus for us this term has been our multi-agency partnership working and really focusing on how that can meet the needs of our learners better. So I've given two examples in the paper how we're doing this. One is our early years inclusion panel, which is a a proper multi-agency focused panel with a number of agencies all getting together to meet the needs of our pupils at a preschool age, to ensure we've got early identification and we know exactly what's coming into our schools and how we can meet their needs. This is a really forward-thinking panel in the respect that the multi-agency partners are wide and cover a breadth of health, children's services, Flying Start, to name but a few. Moving on, we're also part of what we call the AISG, so the ALN Integrated Steering Group, and this panel sits between health and education. We're at the stage where we're developing more work programmes within this panel in order to have better working practices between both services. And you can see on the paper some of the work panels that are in existence at the moment under this board. We have a forward work programme which we revisit during each meeting, and there's a programme of activity to run alongside that. It has definitely reduced the silo working that happens between the services and improved information sharing and communication pathways, as that's been one of the main targets. With regard to our learners, that means that we've got a more accessible multi-agency response to their needs, which is where we need to be. We have set up different strategic working groups and parties in order to meet the ALN strategy. One of those is our behaviour working group, which has met twice or three times I think. Once again, this is a very multi-agency group. So head teachers sit on this group alongside education psychologists, the EWO service, safeguarding leads, leaders from our specialist settings. So there are a wide variety of members on this group. They have also set a forward work programme and to this point have worked on exclusion criteria to ensure that there's more consistency across our schools and a better understanding, and are now in the process of auditing training and professional learning needs. So we have a clear picture for bespoke learning and general learning for our schools. Under the next steps there, you can see exactly where they are aiming to go next. And this working party is producing some positive outcomes which are having an impact on our learners in our schools. Our Strategic Head Teachers ALN Working Group is in its infancy, and the whole purpose of this working group is to engage school leaders and ensure a strategic decision-making panel in order that there's buy-in from all parties. We are collectively looking at problem solving and addressing the system changes that are coming forth with ALN within our authority. Our next steps there to develop a more planned forward work programme with reviews and milestones. Workforce development and school improvement. There has been a noticeable improved collaboration between the ALN department and the learning improvement team within the short time that I've been in post. And you can see in the paper there how that has been planned for and undertaken. We are already seeing some positive impacts of the work we're undertaking together. There's definitely a more joined up thought process and challenge around decisions that are being made about schools and individual learners. And we have come forward with next steps for how we want to move this forward to ensure best outcomes. We have an ALN network group forums which meet each term, but also have held our very first whole local authority ALN network day last term. as you can see, this allows for consistent messages to be passed across all our schools, updates to be shared, training opportunities to be presented, and an open forum for discussion. During that network day, schools and Elencos were encouraged to become part of collaborative research and inquiry projects across settings. And that is something we will continue. We have also introduced targeted behaviour and wellbeing programmes over the last term. One of those being the Adele Bates Behaviour Support Programme, which has been taken up by a number of secondary schools. It's a long-term project. It isn't a quick fix, but quite a comprehensive programme looking at behaviour management strategically across the schools. We're also in the infancy of our emotion-based school avoidance pilot, and that's been offered to all secondary schools, and at present has been taken up by 9 of our secondary schools. And that is a whole service training programme. So there are training elements there for school staff, for service staff, for parents, and is quite all-encompassing. And we will evaluate these programmes as and when we get to that point. A comment is asked to be made on the situation with our PRUs. And as you can see from the paper, there's a bit of a background on our PRUs there, why we need the PRUs, when they were established, and what their operation has been within our service. In 2024, proposals were considered as part of the wider budget planning, but they have been reconsidered at this point, and we've re-established the need for provision in both the north and the south of the authority. So we are currently operating PRUs in both Brecon and Newton, so north and south of the authority, with 30 pupils on roll, and that is part of the ALN strategy. You can see quite clearly there how we propose to redesign the PRU pathway. So there is a far more focus on us being able to get our learners back into mainstream schools, building those relationships, focusing on emotional regulation and resilience, and getting children able to best manage mainstream settings in the future. There are challenges at present, which we are quite open about here, especially in the North PRU, where there's been a little bit of instability with the leadership team. We have an acting head teacher in place to mitigate that at the moment, and we have recently appointed a substantive deputy head teacher, with the head teacher interviews taking place this afternoon. So things are moving in rectifying that situation. The South PRU is far more stable and has a stable leadership structure with positive outcomes there. The last part of the paper starts to highlight our thinking around new provision for specialist, new proposals, I should say, for specialist provision within the authority. This is in the planning stage at the moment. So what I presented is an outline of our thought processes. In the ALN strategy, there is reference to inclusion hubs within the 5 market towns. We have rethought this agenda and are likely to go down the specialist facilities model, ensuring equitable access to specialist support across all of our clusters and being able to address the gaps in provision across the authority. And that we are currently undertaking a piece of work around the ALN demography, looking at all our data around where our need is greatest and how we can fill those gaps to ensure equity. Alongside the specialist facilities model, we are also proposing to promote the community-focused schools approach, which supports disadvantaged learners, learners with ALN, and in fact all learners within schools, because it focuses more on multi-agency working, on working with families and working with communities. As we all know, our children don't exist in school bubbles, and we certainly need to address the effects that their circumstances have upon them. So that is a commitment to the community focus model there. With regard to special schools, plans are underway to look at developing increased capacity at Penmaes at the moment. Brynllawer School, of course, is going through the transformation process. And a quick update on Ysgol Robert Owen. Following a period of instability, the school now has an acting head teacher in place and has been supported by the local authority to get to a place of better stability. Some of our next steps you can see on the paper there. I don't need to take you through those. So those are the areas we'll be focusing on getting support and agreement for in the future. I think that's all for me, Chair. Any questions I'd be happy to take.
Thanks, Judith, for that introduction and taking us through the paper in some depth there. It's a good starting point. Can I just remind members, but we're going to Dr. Richard next, but can I just remind members that we had a significant pre-meet in relation to discuss the way we wanted to move this meeting. Can I just say that we've shared some of the officers' responses to some of our queries. That's available to you, which has been come over to you this afternoon by Kath. So just bear that in mind. Please don't take those questions as answered because we're in the meeting, and if you feel they need to be answered, we need them recorded in the meeting today. Dr. Richard, anything further to add?
Thanks so much, Chair. That was really comprehensive of Judith. I just want to reference the learner in this because, of course, this work is updating you against the IBP, but what we're also seeing is that the beginnings of those important impacts on our learners on our schools. So earlier identification of need is allowing us to put and schools to put in appropriate support plans at an early point, which makes a significant difference to individual learners. Our SIAs are reporting that they're seeing increased engagement in teaching and learning from our learners with additional learning needs. And our ALNCOs are signalling that we're seeing greater engagement between families and schools because that partnership working to support a child, as you know, is absolutely crucial. The portfolio holder referenced in his introduction that originally there was a plan to bring an aligned paper forward with this ALN paper, which would have been our outcomes paper. We can't bring it because we've only had the verified data from Welsh Government in the last 24 hours. But early indications also signal that exclusions for pupils with additional learning needs are decreasing as well. So we are seeing some qualitative and some quantitative evidence that the work we're doing is having a direct impact on learners, and we'll be bringing more evidence around that forward in the February 13th scrutiny. Diolch, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Richards, for added clarity. I'm going to, please, if I miss out a turn today, please respect me because I'm using my phone and my laptop together. Councillor Gareth R first, please.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I've had to join by my phone. IT's not working here in County Hall at the moment. Thank you very much. That's a really detailed report there. And can I just put my thanks to staff, because talking to teachers, when the support comes in, it is second to none. That is what I'm hearing. There is some really, really good support that's going in there. But I just want to raise that obviously concerns regarding the staffing numbers and being able to get out and actually do the assessments and support people, and the time frame from when referral comes in to actually comes in. And my understanding is it can be up to 6 months for some people to come in to before they actually things start to move. Obviously, that sounds like it's improving, but there is concerning that it is there. And just one example, in my local area, we've got one school that has had a a referral for a child to be assisted, and they're talking about going to Penmice, but there's no space. So they've come back, and the education psychologist support has said that they need a 2-to-1 ratio, but Powys will only fund 1-to-1. Obviously, toileting and all these other things that come within there, it is affecting the school and the finances around there. So for me, you know, where we are supporting people with additional learning needs, it is excellent, but it's the time frame from getting them into that supportive system around there and the school. Talking to them, there used to be a ALNN ENCO champion within the clusters that they could go to one another. That no longer exists. Yes, you're having the meetings and they are finding the benefits of those, but those are, you know, there's not that person within the cluster they can go to get advice and support. Something like that is missing at the moment. It seems to be very top down, not bottom up in those kind of areas. And also the additional learning needs. I use myself as an example. I went through school and I'm dyslexic, so I struggled within school and stuff like that. But you know, I found my coping mechanisms, and you know, I've got on with it. In Hay, we got 176 to 180 pupils within there. It all depends which time of the year you look, but 74 of those have been identified as additional learning needs at different levels. How do we support the younger people or the people with a lower level additional learning needs? Because we're doing excellent work at the top level, but it's obviously the lower levels I would like to know a little bit more about and how we can support them, because those are ones that we're letting down, I feel, and a little bit more extra support in that. Hopefully we can support people so that they will be able to have their mechanisms to help them later on in life and cope. Like I said, use myself as an example. I haven't done too bad, but it's, you know, it wasn't for the help of the school. I will say that. I learned more mine after when I left college. Left school and went to college, so I got mine later on in life. I would like to see that we can support our youngsters early on in life around that.
Okay, there's a question in there about support for the lower level. Okay, anybody picking up on that?
Yes, I'm happy to pick up.
Come on, Judith.
Okay. So a number of points raised there. Thank you, Councillor Gareth. With regard to space in Penmice and the individual case you referred to, I won't discuss the case, but what I will say is we're working as we speak on increasing capacity in Penmice, and there is looking to be scope for increased capacity within the very near future. So I'm very hopeful of that moving quickly. With regard to our lower level need learners within schools, they would all be met through the ULP system, and schools in Powys are funded for these children, not in many other authorities, but we do recognise that there needs to be support for these children. So schools are asked to provide a plan of what they would do to support these children at this level. In order to support our schools with that, we are putting on a training event which is fully funded for all Elencos and head teachers in February and March, so we can specifically pick up these children. We will provide examples of good practice in other schools where this is done really well. So it is part of our agenda, and we are looking to address that more clearly. But schools are funded through their provision map to meet the needs of those ULP learners as well.
Thanks, Judith. We're moving on.
Anything else I've missed there?
No,
sorry, Chair. Can I just come back regarding the 2-to-1 where the recommendation comes from the local authority, and obviously that's come through the education psychologist support there. Sorry, I may have got the title wrong, but obviously it is a recommendation from the local authority when you go from 1-to-1 to 2-to-1. What is the process there? Because obviously that does impact the school finances.
Yeah. If I could pick individual cases up with you individually, I will definitely do that.
Yeah, I'd be generic in the way I ask questions.
Okay, yeah. What I would say is it would be picked up through the review of their IDP. So the school would ask for an annual review of the IDP if they're not addressing, if parents feel they're not addressing needs. So that's the process. But as for individual cases, I'm happy to speak to you about Councillor Gareth.
I'll speak to you out of this forum. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, great.
Gareth, please, Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that before I actually raise a question I've got, Chair? My understanding is Gareth mentioned 2-to-1. I'm surprised that the school is getting funding for a 1-to-1 because my understanding is a local authority IDP in the primary sector is a figure of £7,000, which is only going to buy you 5, 6, 7 hours of LSA support per week. If we're going to fund 1-to-1s properly, we need to fund them properly at the right level. And I'll just leave that statement there, and perhaps Judith want to come back after. Can I refer to the spreadsheet that you provided,
Yes.
Judith, as an example? I think it's a really good start on a piece of information. Two questions. I think that it needs to have the funding and for ALN related funding and the ALN related spend included.
Yes, I agree, Gareth. Yes.
And this links, I assume, into the school on a page document that Richard talked about in the governance conference meetings in the autumn. And don't we need to have the allocated colour, the Ranger blue on this page, or how is this going to be used in reference to the school and the page?
Right. Okay. I totally agree with you, and that's my next step forward for this document. It's developing, obviously, but I totally agree we need to be transparent and have the funding for each school on there, and it's part of a whole pack for every school for local authority officers, and the percentage of ALN plus the funding will be on the front page of that. That's the aim of it. The second part of your question, Gareth, this isn't to be ragged in any way related to the data matrix. It's to be used to support schools in conjunction with the data matrix, so officers have a clear picture of what schools are facing. They can understand the level of need, and they know exactly where we'd need to support. So it will help the data matrix in that sense. It's not to be ragged in line with the data matrix.
Okay. And the answer to my first point about the funding for 1-to-1s?
Yeah, so funding is based on a specific amount of money, and that allocation is up to the school to spend according to where they feel the need is there.
So
take your point.
So taking Gareth's point as an example, somebody wants 2-to-1, that's going to cost 45,000.
Yes.
That would need 6 or 7 LA IDP allocations to meet that single child's need.
Yes.
If we're going to have 1-to-1, there needs to be proper funding to meet those 1-to-1 needs.
It would all depend what's actually specified on the child's IDP.
Fully understand that, but if it says that...
Even though somebody might say a child needs 1-to-1, that might not be the recommendation in the IDP. It would need to be looked at according to the specification and the ALP in the IDP, Gareth.
So if this specification in IDP states that this child needs support 20 hours a week, or on a 1-to-1 basis, what funding does that child receive? Because I believe it's only the £7,000.
They receive funding on the basis of an LA IDP.
Yeah, so 7,000, so the school's got to find the other.
Yeah. But then it works in two ways, because there might be another child that has an LA IDP who doesn't require that level of funding, that level of support.
100%.
To them on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I think
that be part of it's part of a whole picture of funding, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
I think we've got the answer to that question, and if there's a recommendation to come out of that, we need to make it. Irig's had his hand up for some time now. Irig, no doubt you're coming back on something. It's already been said.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to make the point about the teaching and learning inside our schools as well, and how we're trying to develop all our teachers to meet the needs of all our learners. So, that is through a lot of the differentiation that we have inside our schools. And it's something that we're noticing a lot more now when we're going into our schools, because we're doing joint monitoring every term that our school improvement advisors are going in. we are noticing that the support that's going in to these learners as well. So it's not only about the need for manpower, but it's about how we deliver our learning as well. And, there is some really good practice going on inside our schools, and we'd like to recognise that as well.
Thanks, Eirig. I'm going to come back to you about our SIAs at some point, but we've got Angela and Lucy with hands up, and Aled. So I'm coming to you next, Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chair, I think I'm going to disagree with my colleague, Councillor Gareth Radcliffe. He thought that this was an in-depth report. It's 27 pages, so I mean, it can't be in-depth. And in fairness to Judith, it is just an update. So it gives us an overview, doesn't it? So it does do that. So yeah, thank you. But I just disagree, Gareth. But I wanted to ask Judith then, in your report, because I wanted to sort of dig a little bit deeper into what you're saying. If you go to page 123 of our pack, and it's number 2, the ALN update. You've got 2.1, understanding the ALN data and intelligence, and below that it says IBP 4.1 and 4.2. Can I ask what that refers to?
So yes, it's the points within the IBP, and Councillor Angela.
Yeah. That's what I assumed it was. So I've opened the IDP, so the Education Integrated Business Plan, April 25 to March 29. Am I on the right document? It's a blue page with a large circle on the front.
Yeah.
I can't find that numbering in that document. So what have I missed, basically? Could you sort of direct me to where I would find those references within the IDP? So it's a 61-page document I've got. I'm just thinking, have I got the wrong document?
Okay, we're going to give it a little bit of...
Chair, it's quite important when we read an overview that we understand the data behind it, and that was what I was trying to do there. Okay. So I'll park that for now, Judith, because I couldn't make those references because I couldn't find the right thing. But going on the document that you have provided for us then, it reads really positively, and fair play, you've not been in post that long, and it looks like a lot of work has gone on. You've said that the team have developed a one-page ALN data profile for each child, and that the information has all come from the TUVI document. So do I take it to read that as far as you're concerned, TUVI is the gospel? It's absolutely correct.
All our information for our ALN learners is stored on TUVI, on our TUVI system.
Yeah, that wasn't the question. Are you confident that the information that is stored on TUVI is correct?
If that's the information schools provide us with, they update their profiles on TUVI. So everything we get from schools is updated to the TUVI system.
So would you have an issue if those one-page documents were shared with the schools so they can cross-check it? I think that might be a good system to make sure, because I've heard in my school that TUVI doesn't always do what we think it does.
Okay. If you saw on the paper, Councillor Angela, that was the next steps in this process, is to share them with all our schools.
Yeah, I appreciate this is at very early doors in terms of this, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, that would be great. No, I think that would be really positive. So my next question.
Transparent.
Yeah. So my next question then, you talk about the multi-agency panels, and I think they're probably really important, aren't they? Because certainly from the children I'm aware of, if they've got an ALN, it's probable that they've got lots of different things going on. It's quite rare just to have one thing, isn't it?
Yes.
But what I want to know is what happens if those partners don't attend? So I hear a lot about partners not turning up for appointments because presumably they have some other emergency, whatever. But what happens then? That meeting's been scheduled, you're there to discuss that child, and some of the partners are missing.
That can be brought back to our panels, Angela. So it could be brought back to our PIP panel. We've put in a new system very recently where we're chasing and tracking things that we've recommended through the PIP panels. So that can be raised again through that means. It can also be raised with the caseworkers involved with the children.
So you said it could be brought back?
Yes.
So what I would like is something where, if we've called this meeting of these very busy and probably well-paid people and somebody couldn't come, the meeting's not going to be fit for purpose, because I'm guessing none of them are just there for the fun of it. So could we have something more robust?
Yeah, we have to take into account here, we are talking about partners from other agencies as well, and we can't.
And that really, I think, is, I suppose, what I'm going round the horses to make. In actual fact, we've got a multi-agency panel, but we have no authority over the attendees. We have no way of making sure that happens. And, you know, I've heard of many cases where, certainly in the past, it hasn't happened, and then nothing happens. So they've got no teeth, no backbone, and that's my concern, really.
Okay, so we plan for them as robustly as we can. Everybody is invited who needs to be there. As I said, we can't control other parties. However, if there's something that is not happening as a result of those meetings and we're not meeting the child's ALP, then that can be brought back, like I said, to PIP panel or via a caseworker if they've got an LAIDP.
Okay.
I think James
I'll leave others ask some questions. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, Angela, I think James and Irig have got their hands up, so to give a bit of a bit more clarification in relation to this. Who's first, James or Irig?
Well, I just wanted to help Councillor Angela with where she would find 4142 in the IBP, Integrated Business Plan. Page 42 and 43, Angela, of the plan. Maybe what Irig was going to say, but sorry, Irig, stealing your thunder. I mean, just on the other issue of how do you, we're not able to compel the other agencies to do to play their part in these integrated panels, and it's a fair point. We can't, as has been, correctly pointed out. But that's one of the reasons why I'm as leader and is carrying on now with the current leader of the council, was so keen that we re-established excellent working relationships with the health board in particular, because it has such a key role in supporting ALM provision. There are still gaps, very significant gaps in provision, and some of those lie with the responsibility with other agencies, including the health board. So it isn't a perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but the better the relationship we have with these other agencies, the more likely they are to play an active and constructive role. And I think as long as we continue with that, I'm sure things will improve.
Chair, sorry, could I just make a point on that?
Yeah, go on, Richard.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's a really important point. We do have joint executive leadership team meetings with Powys Teaching Health Board. Actually, yesterday we've asked for a future item on that joint exec meeting agenda around how multi-agency partners contribute in a timely fashion to local authority IDPs. So, Councillor Angela, I think your question is, to me, really, it's about me holding my equivalents in partner organisations to account for their role in supporting learners in Powys, and I'd be happy to bring back, if it was a recommendation out of the committee, further information on how I'm doing that.
Thanks, Richard. That helps. Angela, are you content at this point? Yep. Councillor Lucy. All right, Lucy, your microphone, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. My first question was going to be the same as Angela's, so that's been answered. Thank you. But I mean, this is a great paper, but as Angela says, it's sort of an overview, and we've discussed how it compares with the paper that was previously presented to us by Simon, because things have moved on, and yet they haven't moved on in many ways. I know we were all really impressed with the way that previous paper was presented, and it looked as though everything was going to be marvellous. And here we are again looking at another paper which looks as though everything's going to be marvellous. But how can we be sure that actually there is enough resource in place to make sure that the provision is as good as we hope it's going to be? So that's my main question. And then I also wanted to ask, as an aside, a little bit about the Adele Bates programme, and if you can tell us a bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Go on, Judith.
Yes, okay. So as far as sufficient resources in place, Councillor Lucy, that's something that I'm actually working on at present. So I'm doing a really deep dive around what is needed, where the gaps in provision are, and what that would look like in the future for our authority. And at that point, I will be able to give you a costed sort of version of where we are and where we need to be in order to ensure equity. So that's where we are with being able to be certain about resources. At this point, it's a data collection exercise around need and gaps in provision, really. Does that answer that for you? Yes.
I guess it reassures me that you're looking at it, but it doesn't necessarily reassure me. It doesn't reassure me that the money will be there to provide the service that's needed.
Yeah, and we are considering that even at this point for a longer term look at what might be needed and mapping that against the FRM. Okay, we've started to look at a 3 to 5 year picture, but we're not quite there with that yet.
Thank you, Judith. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I did have a second question, which was about the Adele Bates programme.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes, go on. That's interesting.
Okay, so this is a package of support around behaviour management and processes and procedures in schools and how schools manage the rising need around social, emotional, behavioural concerns within their schools. And it's working with an agency over a long period, not just a training package. It's working with the schools and the head teachers to look at all their processes, the procedures, and how things can be improved for better outcomes for children. There's one particular school that are further down the line in this programme and seeing some really positive outcomes with regard to exclusions as part of as a result of this training programme having been put in place with the school and the school having worked quite closely with that partnership.
So how would the decisions made about which schools would take part in the pilot?
It was offered to secondary schools and those with particularly significant needs in that area, really, and the capacity for the school at that time to work with that programme as well. So it was a holistic picture.
I understand that there's been some concern about value for money in terms of that programme.
Yeah. Yeah, and that will be evaluated fully when we're at the point where the schools have engaged fully and we have outcomes for it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Allard.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the voice. It's slightly frustrating. There's a lot of children in need of support. And, 5 years ago, we had an Eston review. We had specialists coming in to support the council, having a root and branch reform, and still feels like we're still on that treadmill. And we're not getting there to some degree. For example, in 4.2, you're talking about community focus schools. Ideally have one in each catchment, I assume high school catchments. And there's a number of schools there. Sorry, not 4.2, 4.1, wasn't it? Number of high school catchments without any access. And I assume Newtown and John Beddoes site would have separate would be regarded as separate clusters. I'm not 100% sure. But what is the impact on the children within those clusters who don't have that access? So I know Dr. Richard touched on, the outcomes for the children is what we must focus on. And going back to Lucy's question a little bit around resources, and when your previous answer was talking about a timescale of 3 to 5 years, that's a lifetime in school for secondary for a pupil going through a secondary system. So what is the impact on the children that this is having, this lack of attention within certain catchments, and the resource implications for putting it in place the right level of support?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So we are actually dealing in the present as well. I was talking more long term in relation to Councillor Lucy's question. But we are dealing with a situation in the short term as well, and have accounted for this through our financial FRM proposals, because we realise the additional need, and we realise the implications that's going to have financially as well. So that is being dealt with on a short-term basis as well, Councillor Aled. With regard to the community-focused schools, the proposal from us is that all schools will work along the community-focused school model, or have a commitment to work along this model, because it works in any school at different levels, but there is a commitment needed from schools to engage on this level around this model. So the whole proposal is around encouraging all our schools to be community-focused, model-led schools, but with additional sort of multi-agency bases, which any school can access, dotted across the local authority. That's the proposal.
Okay. My apologies. I was looking at
it's fine.
2 paragraphs at the same time. It was a paragraph above around those the specialist provisions within those the gaps there.
Okay.
And, you know, what timescales are we looking at to get those the gaps plugged?
So that is something we're working on at the moment, and looking to bring a paper to scrutiny quite soon to identify those gaps, and proposals on how we're going to plug those gaps as well. What I would say is, what's very interesting in the work that I'm doing at the moment is there is that need, the equality of need across all areas. There's a huge difference in the amount of need in different catchment areas, and that's something that's coming out of the data that I'm able to pull, showing where we most need provision, to ensure that there's equity and not equality, really, that the need is put where it's needed, and there are quite significant differences between clusters of schools.
Yeah, I accept it's easy to provide a provision where the numbers are high, but when even if it's just one or two within a cluster, they still require that additional resource. And we've been talking about those particular clusters for years and years and years, about there not being any provision within certain areas of the county, and it seems to perpetuate. I just want, I look forward to the next paper and about what steps are going to be taken. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you. Okay, members, I've got Councillor Sue waiting. Richard, I'm coming to you first. I've got a couple of points I'd like to make myself after Councillor Sue, and then we'll return to other councillors' questions. I remind councillors, I'm looking to finish this item at 3:15, so if we can be brief in our comments, that'd be great. So, Dr. Richard first.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I just want to return to Councillor Lucy's question about what's different. And it's a really, such an important question. Well, quite simply, what is different is the learning that has taken place within our service and within our schools since we were inspected back at the start of the year. So what Judith is doing in the work that she's leading on now it's a return to getting the absolute basics right, the nuts and bolts of a really firm system with the right systems and processes. And we're doing that with better evaluation, better use of data, less siloed working, better intelligence coming out of our schools to informing what we do as a service, and getting the right people in the right roles within the service. So there are some fundamental changes to how we work taking place as a result of the learning since essentially this time last year. Now, that's not to say that the Wave 3 strategy work is wasted, because it isn't. We all noted the ambition and the vision in that strategy, but we have had to take a judicious step back to get the basics and the fundamentals right before we pick up that long-term strategy again. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do, so that we can deliver on the broader and more visionary strategy that Judith will bring through. So I just wanted to I wanted to add that comment because I think it's important to see it in that timeline that I've just articulated. Thanks, Chair.
Dr. Richard, that's the first time today I've heard something which I think reflects to where we are today. I don't think we've got quite the right approach in what we're dealing with our scrutiny questions today, but I'll come to that after Councillor Sue. Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick points for Judith. In Ysgol Maes y Dderwen's governing body meeting this week, we spoke about the Bates programme, and I'm pleased to say, I don't know if that was the school that Judith is referring to down the road, but we certainly was in that and glad to have it. The PIUs, God, are they long overdue being sorted out, so that's really pleasing to hear. One question I have for Judith is about the behaviour programme that she said was going to be rolled out throughout the county. I would just like to know how will that work and how will we provide continuity for all the children because of the geography of Powys? How will that actually work? Doesn't have to go into details, just a short, sharp question if she can answer it.
You with that one, Judith?
Yes, of course. Are you talking about the EBSA programmes?
The one you mentioned earlier on.
So the EBSA programme is emotionally based school avoidance.
Not ELSA, no. I was just making reference to the Adele Bates because we talked about it later. But my question to you is about the behaviour programmes that you're going to set up throughout the county.
Okay, so there will be an offer, Councillor Sue, around support for behaviour support, more emotional support and management, which incorporates behaviour support. So there will be a whole authority offer as well as bespoke packages for those that need more or need specifics. So at the moment we offer a whole suite of support through our PRU and through our education psychology service and training around those areas. But we will come up with a county-wide offer alongside then a bespoke offer for schools that need something specific or different to everybody else.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind when we have questions for the headmaster in Maes y Dderwen going forward.
Great.
Diolch yn fawr, Jude.
No problem.
Thank you. Before I return to councillors with returning customers, just got a couple of comments myself. We're hearing some really good work today on the direction of ALN, but let's remember we're here because of the IBP, and that's because Estin's comments in relation to a strategic oversight of ALN in the authority is weak. That's what we must remember, members, because what we're hearing today, we need to be clear that there is a systematic change and that the authority is addressing that. I'm not quite seeing the evidence. We're hearing about really good work and we're hearing about this translating back to schools to officer. I'm clear in that recommendation 3 KPIs. Are those KPIs specific to ALN? Because they should be, so we know that direction of travel. I think that's important. And those KPIs also, are we benchmarking them with Wales data? Because that will show us a genuine shift if that is happening. I'm not hearing about the training and development of our senior leaders, changing their job descriptions into ALN understanding. I'm not hearing that our challenge advisors are being trained and brought up to speed with ALN. I'm not hearing that the resource available to those challenge advisors, the capacity to those challenge advisors. And I think those are the important things that we need to hear to show that the direction of travel is improving from what ALN reported. That's what I don't think we're quite picking up on today. Eirik, Judith, whichever you see fit.
Go on, Eirik.
Do you want to go first, Judith? I don't mind.
No, I just want to reassure you, Councillor Gwynfor, that is a very much a focus of our work between our 2 teams. So we have already engaged in joint professional learning with the learning improvement team, where the ALN team have led that learning and upskilled our challenge advisors on ALN processes, procedures, how to support in schools, and that's planned to continue going forward as well.
Very much.
Okay, go on, Eirik, first.
Sorry, Chair, that's the same point I was going to make, but I'd go even further, because not only were school improvement advisors on that, we actually had all of our foundation learning advisors as well, our professional learning team, and our swyddogion yn y Gymraeg, because we ensure that when we're going in to support schools, we should be looking at all learners. So we want to make sure whichever area we're supporting, we want to be providing that support for everyone. So everyone, we're supporting the teachers to support their learners as well. So that has come. And in terms of, you said, what impact is it having? Well, that's where going in and doing some of our joint monitoring now with our schools, our SIAs are much more confident to say, yes, we are providing, or the schools are providing good quality support, and we are actually having the impact with our learners as well, because they're able to take some of that professional learning that they're doing now and apply that as well. So yeah, there is some definitely something that's coming there. We have to remember we are probably only 9 months away since we came through or out of Estin and then have been working on this. So, it's not going to come perfect now, but there is definitely a shift there from where we were.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I know Dr. Richard has got his hand up. I'm going to challenge you both, and I assume Dr. Richard will answer this. How does Scrutiny judge that evidence? I mentioned benchmarking. How is Scrutiny going to be reassured that this is happening? I'm not doubting it, but how is it happening? Where's the evidence for us to rubber stamp it?
Okay, Chair, I'll come in at that point. So I think that'll be holding us account to the targets which are set in the Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan, which we know are linked to our targets in our integrated business plan. So we have very clear quantitative and some qualitative measures in those plans, which have been, in the way that you've stated, benchmarked across Wales. So I think that's a very clear way that you hold the Education Service and our schools actually to account. The point I was going to make was around quality assurance as well, because it's all well and good that this work is happening in our schools, but it's also about what do the quality assurance processes look like around that. So we have introduced new quality assurance at head of service level and at director level, so that we are quality assuring the quality of evaluations that are coming out of our schools, so that we can validate what Judith and Eirig are saying about teams working better together to provide targeted support in the areas that schools need it. We're also quality assuring school development plans to make sure there's that tie-in between SIA's evaluations and school development plans. And we've also introduced support and challenge meetings for our schools, where head teachers, chairs of governors will come into County Hall and present on their development plans, their self-evaluation, as part of that quality assurance process, to make sure that we're concentrating on the right things with the right evidence base. But I think your challenge is the right one, but also that quality assurance point's important.
Okay, thank you. You've given me a lot of accountability there. Now, is that accountability reflected in governance reports? Anybody? Judith?
Chair, would it be okay if I came in? Emma Palmer.
Yes, of course.
Chief Executive,
Sorry.
Go on, Chief Executive,
Yes,
coming in, Judith.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of, you're spot on in terms of the question that you're raising, and I'm grateful for you raising those points. And may I suggest that in terms of the work programme going forward, that there are deep dives in particular elements of ALN that allow you to delve into bringing forward the specific evidence, so you can use some case studies as an example to demonstrate the impact on the learner. The wider points that Dr. Richard is referring to will come through in terms of the quarterly performance reporting, which I know you've started to see within the scrutiny as well. But that's around the data. I think what we need to do is get underneath that in terms of what are we seeing as the impact on the ground and the difference that's making to our learners, and what's the difference then in terms of those outcomes for those individuals. Because at the moment, when we look at the inequalities, they're growing rather than reducing. It's a national trend, but nevertheless, we're interested in Powys. And so I think a good way would be a deep dive on some of the elements that are covering in ALM, because this is an overview of the IBP from what I understand in terms of the agenda, but maybe we can get into more detail around some of the particular points and bring that evidence before you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm happy to do, sorry,
Go on, Judith.
I'm happy to take that on board as recommendation and bring some real case studies of real life impact on our learners in our schools.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Chief Executive. Dr. Richard, you still got your hand up. Is that a legacy or are you coming in?
Just a point really, just to pick up on this, what CEO has said. The February reports, as you know, will bring through outcomes for our learners, not just exam outcomes, but also attendance and exclusion. So there you will be able to see the impact of the work we're doing or not, and how we're evaluating, adjusting our practice and considering what we need to do to, as CEO has said, raise standards across the authority with a particular focus on narrowing the gaps between our high achievers and most vulnerable groups of learners. But you'll see that in your February papers.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to move to some more questions now because time is against us. Councillor Gareth E, followed by Lucy, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by saying thank you to Emma, because I was going to suggest we did some deep dives into this area as well. So that's really good. Can I ask Judith a question? I've got two questions. The first question is, she mentioned including ALN and FRM. Is that the 1.1 million that's shown under demographics for 26, 27 and 27, 28? And the second question or comment is, I fully understand why we need to build capacity in our special schools at the moment, but surely that is the wrong strategy that we should be following in the long term, because I feel that our strategy should be about developing our mainstream schools that actually meet the needs of the vast majority of our learners. I suspect that the percentage of learners we've got in special schools in Powys is significantly higher than other authorities. And I'd like to have some comparative data on that, comparing us to an authority like Ceredigion, for example, how they meet those needs. But at one stage, when I was an officer, Ceredigion didn't have a special school, but their performance still seemed to be as high or higher than ours. So,
okay.
Nancy, you've tried to come in a couple of times. Are you coming in on this now? Yeah.
I am, Chair, if that's
Go on.
okay. Yeah, so just in response to Councillor Gareth's question, what we've done is in the FRM recognise the emerging pressures that we've been talking about throughout this session, and working with the ALN team, the 1.1 million is based on extra money in this next financial year, based on TUVI data that we are seeing that schools are putting on, quality assured by Judith's team. And then looking at what an estimate then for future years, but also, Chair, as well, if I can say, in regards to the budget side of ALN, we are also made provision under our risk budget as well, for various different elements that link back to ALN with regards to demography, special school changes in year, because we've seen a significant rise in our pupils in our special schools. So we're trying to make sure that within our FRM, our main FRM, and we think about the risk items around our ALN service as well, Chair. Thank you.
So just following up on that, Nancy, what level of budget have you put at risk? Or do we want to leave that until we come on to the budget meeting later in the month?
We'll give Nancy a bit of time on that. We're going to come back to that. Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, there's a question as well around special schools.
Go on in.
And how we deal with the pressures, etc.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'll take that. So in line with lots of what I've said today, Councillor Gareth, there is without doubt an increased level of need across our authority, as there is nationally. I haven't done an in-depth benchmarking, but certainly news coming out of the local authorities at the moment are that they are investing in additional specialist places, both for specialist provisions and specialist schools. One local authority has come out this week and said it's making provision for 200 plus children in their specialist schools over the coming years. So it is a national picture. I haven't benchmarked against every authority, but there's certainly a number of authorities who are planning in the same way that we are.
Thank you, Judith. Content, Gareth?
Sort of, Chair, yeah. I think
Okay,
that I'll have further discussions as we go through.
Okay. Councillor Lucy.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Alid's question about the specialist centres and the gaps in provision. And we were told that there was a very different need in different areas. And I wonder if we've looked at why that is and whether indeed it's because in some of those centres where there's less need, that there's better provision for the early years, and whether that's having an impact on schools higher up the system.
I think that is not part of it. It is part of a big picture, Councillor Lucy. So our early years provision and our processes for early years have significantly improved, and that does have an impact, obviously, on how schools manage need when they come into mainstream school. And alongside that, our provision for getting children into school, into the right provision at an earlier age, is far more advanced than it's ever been. Having said that, I think it's a bigger picture we need to consider there. There's a lot of consideration needed to be taken around the whole community aspect, the gender of disadvantage, family circumstances. There isn't one factor that contributes to how there is a level of need there. Certainly we need to look at how provision is put forward in those areas where there isn't a great need and the impact it's having on the learners. That is one aspect of what we will consider as part of a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I've got Councillor Angela and then Councillor Alid. Councillor Alid will have to be the last question on this agenda item. I know we've run out of time, but we won't complete our meeting if we're not strict with this. So, Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I think we've hardly scratched the surface here because this is a really important issue. And ALN is impacting on our schools. It's impacting on their ability to address the needs of those individual children, but also on the rest of the cohort and the school budget, and that's coming next. And we really haven't come to any conclusions on this. But what I want to know is, really, we've got years where we haven't perhaps delivered what we should, and maybe this is a recognition of that by the local authority, because you're saying you're going to start doing things differently. So to my mind, that implies that we think what we've been doing to date isn't working. I think it's great that you've got the targeted programme, the Adele Bates in high school, but I mean, maybe the fact that that's needed reflects that things haven't been addressed in primary school. And I'll take that back further to early years, because unless, and Margaret isn't here today, but I know she would be saying we need to be investing in early years. We need to be identifying these children and their needs earlier, and we need to be meeting those needs. And their interventions should be temporary. We should be supporting children so they become independent learners with less help, not more, but it looks like we're putting more help in down the line. So it's just not working. I'm not hearing anything that gives me confidence that any of this will make difference to the children in my school who are not getting the support and the provision we need. And part of that, sorry, Chair, I'm on my soapbox now, but part of that is we look at the child in isolation. Of course we do. Their IDP, individual child, what support do they need? Right, the school can provide that support. But then there's another child and another child, and an individual class in an individual school could have 6 children with different needs, different behavioural issues, different home lives, as you've highlighted, Judith, a whole range of issues. But actually, there's one teacher. And as Gareth said there, the likelihood of having a full-time person to support is almost zero. I just think that we need to look at the whole picture together as well as the individual's needs, and that's not happening. That is not happening, and I'm sorry, but our schools, what I am hearing from the schools is they, meaning us, the local authority, and actually there shouldn't be a they, because we should all be in it together, and that's not how it feels. And I'm really sorry, but that's not how it feels. So I want to know, what difference is all this going to make on the ground to those pupils?
Okay, so if I start from the very beginning, certainly with early years identification, there is evidence, quite considerable amount of evidence, that we are identifying the needs of our children earlier than we have ever done before. And that's through a variety of mechanisms, as I've alluded to earlier on, such as the multi-agency working, the earliest PIP process. I won't cover old ground again, but there are definitely procedures in place that are ensuring that we are identifying these needs for our children at the earliest possible opportunity. We are putting procedures in place to make sure that that is transferred then into school. So our new transition panels are being put in place this year, which will ensure that children's needs are identified and passed on to schools as early as possible. It's a new process, Councillor Angela, and something that we've put in place to identify a gap that was there for some schools. So I appreciate where you were coming from on that point. With regard to multiple needs within a classroom, I totally agree. Every school is different and every classroom will be different, and the amount of needs in each classroom will be different. And part of the training programme that we're putting in place in the next couple of months is to be able to share practice in how to manage those needs. So identifying schools where they do this extremely well, they are able to manage a multitude of needs, and taking learning points from those schools and building on what we know works. And it is, the school can use that money to meet the children's needs according to their IDP in a way that they feel is appropriate, and they can do that in consultation with local authority officers as well.
In all due respect, Judith, that is only if the IDP has been completed and everybody's satisfied that that is correct.
Yes,
but when that child presents without an IDP, it takes too long.
There is a process to follow, you're right, yes. But in the meantime, there is consultation with the local authority whilst that is going on, and officers support schools where they're asked to.
I'm not sure that's always true, but I'll...
Okay, the question's been answered. If you're in disagreement with it, Angela, please come up with a recommendation and we'll see where we go from there. Councillor Allied, you'll be the last question.
Thank you. The discussion's moved on a bit. Chief Exec talked about the working group, and I think Judith mentioned that, looking at case studies. There's a real danger of when we have case studies in front of us, whoever's on our working group, it tends to be where we've got it right. But we also need to have that case studies where we have not got the provision right and the impact on that child's outcomes. We know, having a look at case studies where we got it right might give us a warm glow, but it doesn't really sometimes represent the whole picture. And it's really important that the whole picture is represented, because I've been here long enough and we've always struggled with ALN. It goes back a number of years, and Angela highlights this. We do need, as a scrutiny committee, to keep a close eye on this as it develops, and constantly check back to make sure we are really achieving the outcomes we want to achieve. But Judith, and thank you, Richard, as well.
Yeah, it's a good point to finish on outcomes, and I think that's the crux of it all. Dr. Richard, last word with yourself.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Angela, really. Just that point about how the local authority is working with schools. And yeah, I think from what you said, your feedback is that you're picking up from the schools that you're close to, that's not positive. That's not what the evidence is showing us. So when we look at how our schools are engaging with the professional learning offer we're delivering, we've got strong uptake on senior leadership programs, 30 plus, which cover aspects of ALM provision and how to lead good quality ALM provision in a school. We've got 50 plus individuals signed up on our new middle leader professional learning programs. The ALNCO network, which Judith has spoken about, 55 members regularly attending meetings, sharing practice amongst themselves, and also the cluster networks, which are doing very good work to share best practice. So I think I am going to challenge back on that point, because what I am seeing doesn't reflect that across the system. That's not to say that might not be the case in some individual schools, and it would be good to have a conversation about those individual schools around how we can bring them into what we're doing across Powys. But we are working very hard in our engagement with schools, but as people have noted, it's a challenging area. The need is increasing. The need is becoming more varied and in areas unpredictable. And that's not just within our authority, it's nationally. And there's a third point, Chair, I'd just like to make as well. It's also about the responsibility of our school leaders to lead their schools to be inclusive environments and to make sure that the focus on the ALN learner is properly understood in individual schools. And sometimes the challenge we have to bring to schools to make sure our school leaders are doing that creates a degree of tension. But I don't think it's a fair observation to make that tension is system-wide, but it may be there with individuals. But what I can be confident about is we are not shying away from bringing the challenge or the support with it. And where we are in our improvement journey at the minute, we are going to have these points of tension as we work through. But I don't agree that it's system-wide.
Can I come back on that, Chair? Because I think I've been misinterpreted there, because the school I'm talking about, as you know very well, Dr. Jones, does engage very well with the local authority, has very, very positive school improvement discussions with the local authority staff and does work with the staff. I'm talking about those rare individuals, as Judith has said, there's a huge range of issues within our pupils, but also you've talked about there, I think you're guilty there of what Councillor Ali Davis just said, celebrating the good, and it's important that we do that. But 55 members of staff attending these things, that's great. But how many thousands of school staff do we have? So really, we need those figures in percentages. How many percent of our head teachers, deputy heads, ALNs? So that would be good data then to have. So I think maybe that would be useful for us, that we have the number and we have the percent as well, and then we can make a judgment whether it's a reasonable amount. But I don't disagree that the local authority are doing a lot of work. I 100% agree that, and I would hope that you know that I'm backing that and behind that. But what we are talking about is those cases that are missing, that are not being met, isn't it? They are the minority, but they're important.
Definitely final word. Have you got your hand up there, Dr. Richard?
Oh, sorry, Chair. I know you probably don't want this to become a ping pong, but no, I take your point, Councillor, about the individual cases. I think what you've just suggested there around us bringing to scrutiny a summary of our professional learning offer to the profession across Powys, with numbers and percentage of uptake, and we can bring the full breadth of what we offer, not just the senior and the middle leadership development that I've suggested. If the committee thought that appropriate, I would be really pleased to bring that work forward so you could challenge it.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. We'll complete it there. Thanks everybody for their contribution to that agenda item. It takes us to item 8 on the agenda, committee recommendations to Cabinet on our previous item. So members, I'm looking to formulate some recommendations from the discussions we've had today. So please speak freely, and myself and Kath will pick up on things which we think has been discussed, which we thought would come forward as recommendations as well. Councillor Anza, Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, so firstly, that one, as Dr. Richard has just given it to us, I think that's an excellent suggestion that we have that data. Secondly, how do the school service, how does Dr. Richard hold our partners to account, and what powers do we have to encourage and get them to attend? And then I would like to ask that when we have a paper such as this, that is actually an overview that links to a deeper, more meaningful paper, that we have the link to that actual paper, because for me, I picked up the wrong document online, and actually it would have been useful to have the right version of it, just so we can read them together. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, I've got 4, Chair, and I think they're different to Angela's. The first one is, as Judith said, she's going to update the spreadsheet for the funding against expenditure for ALN. The second one, I think we need to do, and this is perhaps for Nancy, that the authority should consider as part of its fair funding reform review for next year, looking at the ALN uplifts, etc. The third one is following on from Emma's consideration about the deep dive into ALN. And I think we need to do a number of deep dives into ALN. And the final one, and Judith hasn't mentioned her previous school yet, and I'm not going to name her previous school, but I personally think we should arrange a scrutiny committee visit to Judith's previous school, because you will see a true community school in action. I had the privilege of being there last year before going to a conference that Sarah was part of organizing, and it was a stunning presentation that we received. I'll say no more.
I'd be happy to organise that.
Members, are you clear on those recommendations thus far? From my notes, I think we need to that the information from schools is cross-checked and is returned to schools. Yeah, so there's a recommendation there. Is there a resolution in relation to clarity that we have capacity and resource, and the training developed to challenge advisors and governance? Is there a recommendation surrounding that?
Yeah, there was, Chair, and I think that links nicely to with us having how many are going, the numbers, as Dr. Richard said, in numbers and in percentages, so we can see the uptake.
Yeah. Anything else, members? Councillor Gareth, Councillor Bryn. I know Councillor Bryn's had trouble with his internet this afternoon, but he's with us now. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch yn iawn. Dwi'n iawn I siarad Cymraeg?
Yeah.
Okay. Diddorol iawn gwrando ar y holl sgwrs I gyd. Oes na le I cael argymhelliad ar un, wel, debyg iawn I beth Aled wedi awgrymu bod ni'n edrych ar achlysuron lle mae pethau ddim wedi gweithio. Dwi'n gallu meddwl am achosion yn etholaeth fi lle mae yna problemau wedi bod, a darllen rhwng y llinellau dwi'n cael yr argraff bod sawl achos arall mewn ardaloedd eraill o lle mae problemau wedi codi. Ac I jyst yn meddwl fysa edrych ar yr achosion negyddol yma yn rhoi cyfle I ni deall yn well lle mae'r problemau yn tagu'r system.
Yeah, yes, it's an interesting initiative, that. I'm not sure how we can word that into a recommendation. Would you be happy for us to work on that prior to submitting the recommendations? Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, one final one. I'm surprised Bryn didn't mention this, Chair, is when reviewing our specialist provision, we need to make sure we provide equity in both languages. You know, I'm fully aware if we take the Llandrindod catchment, we've got specialist provision in Llandrindod, but it's not in the Welsh medium. It's only in the English medium, as an example. So I think, you know, and that's not picking on the schools, but that's just something we need to look at, especially as we've got an increase in number of our learners, percentage of our learners going through the Welsh medium.
Councillor Gareth, it's a very interesting point, but I'm not sure that we can be allowed to table it as a recommendation, because we didn't have that discussion in the meeting, but we'll have a think about it. It's a very important point. I'm not dismissing it at all, but we didn't actually have the discussion about it in the meeting. But the point has been made now, and I'm sure that's
fully accept that, Chair.
Resonates with officers. There was another one which I cannot think of at the moment, but I'm reading my notes, which are very untidy. Kath, is there anything else that we've missed there?
Okay, Chair, I've got rather extensive notes from the meeting. I did, I think, highlight.
Right, okay.
Members, one about accountability, making sure that it's reflected in the governance reports.
Accountability and benchmarking, yeah. Evidence-based, that we as a scrutiny committee can evidence that we're following on from the recommendation from Eston, yeah?
Yeah.
Good. If that's the case, we'll move on. I'm assuming because we're all working from home that if you want a comfort break, you can take them. But if anybody wants a comfort break, please speak up now because I'm fully aware of the legislation if I don't offer it to you. But I would like to move on to item 5 on the agenda, the school funding formula. Yeah, members happy to move on? Good. Going to once again going to Councillor James before we move into the depth of this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief because I know we're pushed for time now, and this is such a big issue. And I think we're very wise to take the previous item first because it links in so closely with the discussion that's just about to take place. It's a very complex issue. Obviously, the school funding formula is Byzantine in its complexity. But I do think, and I probably want to come back at the end as well, but just to preface the discussion, the Cabinet has had a lengthy discussion about this, ranging from do we bother to do this at all? Is it really worth doing this? To actually fully accepting it, and the consensus view is it very much is worth making these changes that have been proposed. It will be a fairer system, and will, I think, assist with schools' transformation. But it is not the end of the story, not by a long way, and has to be part of a much wider transformation, speeded up transformation process. Because although it reduces the inequities in the system, it doesn't eliminate them. It does assist somewhat in reducing budget deficits in most of the secondaries, but only slightly. And as I say, it doesn't really. It's definitely fairer. But it is not. It cannot be the whole story, and there is, a big elephant in the room, which I'm sure we will come to, around small school uplifts and the like, which we need. The council needs to discuss in detail. But I recommend these changes as the portfolio holder, but don't think this is the end of the story by a long way. So thank you.
Thank you, James. That's a great introduction. Who's leading on this, just as a means of a further introduction, or are you happy for us to go straight to questions?
I don't know whether, it's up to you. If you want Nancy to make a presentation, I'm sure she would.
Nancy, do you want to just give us a brief introduction? Because you're the financial guru.
She is, absolutely.
Go on, Nancy.
Is that okay, Dr. Richard?
Yeah.
I can see you had your hand up, sorry, and Chair.
Certainly, Nancy. I was just going to say, Chair, it is a big paper. I'm mindful of the time. So if you did want to move into questions, and if there was a need to provide any wider context in our responses, we'd be able to do that as we work through.
Members, what do you want to do? Do you want to go straight to questions, or should we have a brief introduction from Nancy?
I think, Chair, we need a brief introduction from somebody from the Education Service to give education background for why we're making these changes, proposing these changes.
That's a question you can pose after Nancy's introduction. Nancy, if you could be brief, that would be great.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you, Chair. So before members today is a paper on the school's funding formula, which you will be aware we regularly review our funding formula, and it's good practice to do that. And over the past few years, we've focused on different items within that. More recently, ALN in 2024. And the current paper before you today is around amendments to the primary phase formula in regards to small school top-ups and how they are calculated, and the same with regards to the class size top-ups the schools receive as well. In terms of the secondary, we have got proposals around amendments to the way we fund the option sizes in component 1 of the formula, and the impact then on teaching and learning top-ups, and a review of the small school top-ups, much like the primary with regards to the secondary phase. And lastly, Chair, ending with a review of the scheme for financing schools, with a few amendments to suggest as well in terms of our proposals. And just to say really that this is part of a wide working group that's with the formula review group and overseen by our school's budget forum in terms of the governance around it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nancy. Councillor Gareth, you've got your hands up. I'm just going to add a bit of structure to this. If we could deal with the consultation first and then move into the other paper, I think that would be useful. Councillor Gareth, you've got your hand up. No, microphone, Gareth.
Sorry, Chair.
There we go.
Can I ask that question from Dr. Richard or Councillor James about what's the educational reasoning behind the proposed changes, especially when you look in the primary sector, and based on my modelling that I've done, we have got schools that are going to lose £60,000 plus in funding in a full year. I don't think that is an option we should be going down. And I will be making a recommendation at the end that we don't actually go forward with the primary school proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Richard, Nancy's got her hand up actually. Go on, Nancy.
Thank you. Gone back on mute. Sorry, Doctor. Do you want Dr. Richard to come in first, Chair, with regards to the education side?
Well, yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Chair. Yeah, as Nancy has said, the paper is the outcome of the consultation. It's been through consultation with our schools, all of our schools, thorough engagement, and with the school budget forum. So what the paper brings forward is a proposal to fairly fund the formula. In terms of education outcomes, particularly at a secondary level, this funding formula will allow us to have the optimum number of learners in our classrooms. And of course, we know that smaller class sizes allow for better outcomes, especially when we consider the needs of our most disadvantaged learners. So it's a proposal that does really focus on those learners where we know we need to ensure that they reach the level of attainment that we know that they are capable of achieving. In terms of the optimum class size, what we know happens when we have classes which are too big, it reduces that individual attention that our learners need. It makes classroom management more difficult for our teachers. Often there's challenges around space and the use of space to be able to deliver good quality pedagogy, good quality learning. And of course, there's a clear link between large class sizes, teacher burnout, inability to prepare properly and to give proper feedback and differentiate in the learning, the feedback and the preparation. I suppose, moreover, what the formula proposals do is allow us to offer a greater breadth and a greater range of pathways for our learners. And we know that we want to be an authority that is learner focused. And that means that our learners can have a very clear line of sight progressing through their time in school 3 all the way through to further education work, etc. So there are really clear education benefits which underpin the proposals in the paper.
That's for secondary. What about primary? Because you haven't addressed the educational benefits of these reviews for the primary sector in my mind.
Go on.
Sorry, Chair, am I okay to come in there? Great. Eirig might want to join as well. So the funding formula is a fair funding formula. And in achieving a fair funding formula, there will be differences in the funding to the primary and the secondary sector. What we're confident of is that with the work that our finance teams and school improvement advisors do with our schools at primary level, that we're able to, with the principles of this paper, be able to provide the support needed to improve teaching and learning in our classrooms. We're investing in leadership, we're investing in teaching and learning. So it's more than simply the finances that a school receives. It's about how that school uses those finances and that wider package of enhanced support which we're bringing to all schools across the authority. There will be financial challenges for some of our schools. And I think it's fair to say that, but it's about how we as an authority then work with those schools to move forward. And for those schools where there may be a detrimental effect, you'll note in the paper that there is the proposal of phasing change, and that phase will come with strong support and strong challenge to meet the challenge of that change to our schools.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Richard. I'm going to come to Nancy, and then I'm going to put a bit of structure to our meeting. Nancy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that to be really clear about the primary proposals, there are amendments to two allowances. The proposals also propose within them to amend capitation that is fed into the per pupil component 1 principle of the formula. And also premises. And I think we need to be really clear here that with anything with regards to a funding formula, this is a distribution of funds that exists within the total envelope. How schools then spend that money is local management of schools. Also, just to pick up on Councillor Gareth's point around the range of changes within the primary sector, that is one side of it. That is one side looking at the funding changes. What we will do and have done is we look at modelling on those changes and what effects they have. We will need to work with the individual schools around what their structures are. So just because a school is losing a amount of money, there may be amendments that they are able to do within their structures or within their other elements of their budgets to mitigate that element of change within them. And as Dr. Richard said, the proposals also set out a transition phase for the primary sector. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions, but I've got an apology to make. We've got Anwen. Anwen's no stranger to us. She's Deputy Chair of the School Budget Forum and runs a bit closer to the funding formula than we do as in Scrutiny. So before we go to questions, I think perhaps it'd be interesting to take the School Budget Forum's overview in relation to the funding formula. Apologies, Anwen. You know I'm very disorganised, so you will understand why I didn't come to you before we started the conversation. So Anwen, please.
Galan, thank you very much, Chair, and no worries, I've managed to work in the background nice and quietly. So Guy just gadarnhau, and I'd like to confirm that I am here representing the Budget Forum, which is one of the statutory bodies that have to be held in every local authority. And I'm really pleased that the representations from head teachers, from primary, secondary, special, all age schools and governing bodies elected me as Vice Chair on my appointment as Head Teacher. So I'm here on representation, as I said, of the Schools Budget Forum. And what I would like to share is we did meet and we're very grateful to the officers last week to discuss the proposals and have done as the proposals have been put forward. We wanted to recognise, as has been done in the paper that's been shared with you on our response, we wanted to recognise the hard work of the officers in working towards this formula review, and also for the opportunity for the Budget Forum to give their opinion. So this is the voice of the Budget Forum members, and these are the comments which we have put forward ready for next week's meeting. So we were and wanted to recognise again that the support the local authority are giving to schools and the recognition of the need to fully fund the Budget Forum and identify the pressures that are currently facing all schools from all age, secondary, specials and primary schools, so that the pressures are still very much there. And interestingly, many of the pressures are coming from the increasing demands from ALN and wellbeing, and of course, as I'm coming to my next point, the change in the curriculum. So as a Budget Forum, we wanted to clarify that we also have recognised that the main beneficiaries, of course, are the secondary schools or the secondary phase in an all-age school, with just over 1.8 million if it's passed proposed within the funding formula. But as a Budget Forum, the opinion, unanimous opinion, is that we are very, very, very supportive of that move, with in particular the need to change the ratio from 1 to 25 to 1 to 20 in the options pages. One thing that I don't want to repeat what what Dr. Richards said regarding the need for the changes, but the other need which is facing us as schools is that the curriculum has changed at GCSE level. So we're in year 1 currently of the new GCSE qualifications. Further qualifications will come on board in September. And then in September 27, there's a whole breadth of new qualifications coming on board, known as VCSEs, or Vocational Certificate of Education, and Skills for Life and Work. Those will bring significant pressures for us as schools. So funding at 1 to 20 will allow us as schools to be able to offer that vocational and academic breadth of provision. I must note that actually the reason we've gone on the proposal was 1 to 20 is that the current position of our schools is that on average we are running classes of 20 and not 25. So could be an explanation for the past where some of our secondary schools have been running deficits. So as a budget forum, we've been fully supportive of that change or proposed change. Secondly, the revised formula obviously looks at the funding, and as I said, will bring hopefully 1.8 million extra to the secondary sector. The one question the budget forum have asked of the local authority officers, very similar to what Councillor Gareth Jones asked, was what impact will that have on larger schools and smaller schools, dual stream, single stream schools. So just to make sure that the modelling has been undertaken carefully to make sure that no secondary is a loser in that change, which takes me swiftly and officially on to as well the question around the winners and losers of the primary sector. We do, as Budget Forum, recognise that the overall situation for primaries will be neutral. However, there is a question there around who will be the winners and who will be the losers. There is also another consideration from the Budget Forum that if there is additional funding going into our schools and all secondary and all age schools understand the commitment to have balanced in-year budgets as a minimum, that one is, I'm quite confident speaking on behalf of heads, we're all trying our very best to bring those balanced in-year budgets. The question the Budget Forum wanted to bring forward was what would be the expectations around repaying deficits. What would be the percentage of, if you've got in-year situations of balanced, how much of that percentage would you expect to go back to paying the deficits, which some of our schools have in place. And then our final comment, and I'm not sure whether some of the members will ask this, is despite as heads, I know as secondary heads and all age heads, we did urge all secondary heads and all age schools to comment and to respond to the consultation. It was also asked of all primary and special schools heads as well. But we wanted as a budget forum to note that we were disappointed with the number of head teachers and governing bodies that did respond. As a head teacher, I certainly did respond, but it is very disappointing when officers are working exceptionally hard for schools that not all schools responded either positively or negatively to the consultation. So we have asked if there is a way that we as a budget forum and officers can work together to try and support perhaps different methods, workshops, so different bodies or ways of gaining governing body and head teacher opinion in a different way rather than just in a form for future consultations, because everybody's point of view is very, very important. However, to conclude, and thank you, Chair, for giving me the time, the Budget Forum wanted to share with you all that we are very much, as a Budget Forum, in full support of the work of the officers and the proposed changes. Diolch o galon.
Diolch Anwen, and certainly gives us a bit of assistance in scrutiny to hear from the coalface, and it's interested in your comments, and some of the comments were made in the pre-meet as well. Councillor Aled.
Thank you, Chair. I know Gareth got a really strong background in school finance, but he circulated spreadsheets earlier today. To be honest, I haven't had a really good look. I was wondering whether it has been verified by officers. But in some primary schools, there's a potential £1,000 a head reduction in funding, which in any terms, that's quite significant. But having said that, and I'm not sure who said it, probably Nancy, but funding formula is just a mechanism of delivering funding. And until you know what the quantum is, and then you run it through the system and understanding the impact on the various schools, it's really difficult to make that assessment. And the only assessment that I want to know is, can the schools, all schools, have at least an in-year balanced budget and deliver all the requirements that they are required to deliver. And Anwen mentioned, the additional curriculum changes that are coming from Welsh Government, and that creates an additional uncertainty. And sometimes it's difficult for schools to respond to this sort of consultation because it's difficult to understand what it actually does to your budget sometimes without the quantum of the budget being known, and then officers to run it through the system. A senior officer did say before Christmas that I know we got the budget setting process coming up fairly soon now. Senior officers did say that they would run the funding through the funding formula so we as a committee can understand the impact on all the schools. So a couple of questions there really about the extreme end of the impact within some primary schools, whether the officers have verified this, and I'd be really grateful to see the budget proposals which are going to the Cabinet next Tuesday, I think, isn't it? What the impact of that will be when you run it through the system on the individual schools, and whether each and every individual school can set a balanced budget. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Yeah, a couple of good questions. I'll add one in relation to the consultation and in relation to, and the other one in relation to balanced budgets as well. Nancy.
Chair, yeah, just to be clear, I have not verified any data in terms of any modelling. The only modelling that has happened is by myself in terms of the work that we do with the Formula Review Group. So just to clarify that. But coming back to Councillor Aled's point in terms of the effect, actually, clearly in the documents that were part of the consultation, we set out the principles, the current principles that we are proposing. So the current principles for small schools, there is a banding system on pupil numbers. The current principles on class size protection is an amount of top up per pupil. We also then added in the proposed changes that we were consulting on, which would enable you to model as individual schools to be able to comment on that. But it's very much about principles. We have showed Schools Budget Forum and the Formula Working Group different impacts on different schools, but I must come back to the point that it's about principles with a funding formula. How schools spend it then is up to them, but also that the funding side is one way of looking at any effect on schools funding. Actually, what it's their structures and working with them, with the school improvement advisors, to look at their structures in terms of that. So, there will be further work to do when schools have their funding. There will also be other changes to schools funding in relation to ALN and count dates around ALN within that, and grants and the like from Welsh Government. That all will be pulled together as it is every year, and we will work with schools in those individual meetings in the spring in the first instance, and we do it on an ongoing basis. Also, just to come back to Aled's point, Councillor Aled's point, if I may, Chair, around the deficit piece, there will always be schools where we will need to work with carefully in terms of their financial picture, sometimes the exceptional circumstances they find themselves in. And we fully committed as officers working together with those schools around deficits. We ask schools to go as far as they can in mitigating deficits, and then we work with those schools around suggesting areas where they could review in order to mitigate any deficits and the financial situation they find them in. And we try and do that as early as possible in order to enable schools to plan. And that's why we've got a transition element within this proposals today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Can I just...
Yeah, come on, Alex.
Just a quick question. Would some of the changes be as dramatic as £1,000 a head or not?
In terms of how I've looked at it, we've looked at it on a school by school basis, Councillor Aled, in terms of our modelling. And just for you to note in the paper that actually, when you look at the modelling in terms of the proposals, you'll also be able to note in the paper that because of our modelling that took place and the formal review process in section 10 of the report, it became clear that the premises and capitation allowances within the school's funding formula were not provided an adequate level of resources for schools, because we'd previously focused on staffing costs and a fully funded formula in 25-26 for schools, and the utilities prior to that, and ALN obviously the main focus in 2024. So because of that model in that review we had done, that indicates to us that we need to do further work, and therefore the proposals include amendments to capitation and premises, which will be invested into the school's funding formula on the principles that we've previously consulted on.
Okay, Aled is silent, so we'll move on. Councillor Gareth, E.
Yeah, can I just confirm that I've just picked the figures up out of the consultation document and the previous information I had about the current formula, and you know, it's a simple process of actually looking at what the payments coming in from the small schools allowance last year's a lump sum and the class size allowance as a figure, and it's a simple process for those two. But what it points out for me is and I agree with Nancy, we need to look at principles, and I don't disagree with the principles being followed, but actually take away from a school £60,000. I know it's going to be phased, especially period when my understanding is that the school's got to give at least 2 terms just to make staffing changes. So the earliest a school that thinks it's going to be fine for next year can make a change is Christmas. I got really concerns with that. Can I follow up with a question to Anwin? The new one shows for the option blocks of going from 1 to 25 to 1 to 20. Is that phased in at all from 24, 26, 27? So is the cost of that going to be more 25, or is there a expected cost in 26 and 27 from September?
Chair, is it okay if I come in? Jenny, fydd o fewn.
Yeah, come on, Emma.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, for that question. So for schools, just to clarify, the new GCSEs did start this September, so we're already on the journey, with additional, what they're calling phase 2 coming in now in September 26. So the first 2 phases have been very, very similar to what we've had already, and the old WJC qualifications very, very similar, but I will add that the demands on schools are significantly more because of the increased level of what we call the NEAs, or the non-examined assessments. There's significant additional pressure there on schools. But as we start planning, and we as head teachers are currently undertaking this planning now as we speak, because the data and the information about the new quals are coming out now this March, ready for us to start planning in September for year September, which is September 27. There's a huge new breadth of qualifications, the VCEs and the Skills for Life and Work qualifications. They will, without doubt, put significant additional pressures on us, because they are significantly more sort of the vocational and not the classic geography, history, business, etc. They're very, very unique around skills for life. So those, Councillor Jones, will bring significant pressures on schools. So that's why we are so supportive as a budget forum of that increased funding from 25 in an option class to 20. That we see as very, very, very important for schools.
No, sorry. So would I be right in assuming then that the pressure on the budget is year 10, some of it's year 10 from last September, September 25, but a lot of it is year 10, 20, from September 27. So surely shouldn't the 1.8 million be phased in over 2 to 3 years?
If I can tell you honestly, though, if you look at the outcomes, and it was in the consultation paper, schools are already on that 1 to 20 average. So if you phased it in, all you're doing is delaying that time for our secondary and all age schools to be able to deliver in-year balanced budgets, which is one of the key aims of the local authority. So all you'll do is just delay that time and that position, because the schools are already running at 1 to 20, not 1 to 25, because of the demands.
Yeah, so follow-up question to that then. Does that mean that as from September 27, we will see a further reduction in the ratios from 1 to 20 downwards?
Well, it's very much where, as head teachers, we're currently working with WJC and Qualifications Wales to understand what that means. So if I'm going to be honest with you, Councillor Jones, perhaps if as a budget forum we can come back to you, because we're working with WJC as we speak on what will that mean for us as schools, etc. So I'm very aware that the budgets of the local authority are very, very difficult, and we as head teachers will do everything we possibly can to make it work within 1 to 20. But 1 to 20 makes such a big difference to us compared to 1 to 25.
Oh, I understand that, but it's also focusing money where at the right time in the right place, isn't it?
But the needs of our pupils today are so different that there's fewer and fewer that want that pure academic, that breadth of a few vocational subjects is very, very important.
I think this is useful information, and and to hear the viewpoint of the school budget forum. But let's remember we do have officers within the meeting to answer these questions as well. I don't think we parked up, Nancy, in relation to small schools and the effect that the formula is having on small schools. But let's see if this is developed as we go through. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch yn iawn. Dwi eisiau dod nôl at trafodaeth sy'n newydd bod nes mlaen, ond dwi wedi paratoi'r cwestiwn hwn, so cael hwn o'r ffordd, mae'n sefyll ben ei hun, dwi'n meddwl. Yn y pre-meeting, ddaru ni codi'r ffaith nad oedd dyna ddim sôn am mynd am trochi yn y fformula cyllidol yma. Ar yr un pryd, yn dod i fyny i'r cabinet wthnos nesaf, mae yna gynnig i roi 100,000 o bunnoedd tuag at trochi. Eisiau cadarnhau dau beth. Yn gyntaf ydy'r 100,000 sy'n dod i'r cabinet, ydy hwnna'n ychwanegol i'r 100,000 o grant gan Llywodraeth Cymru sy'n dod pob blwyddyn, ac ydy hwnna ar gyfer sicrhau bod yna darpariaeth trochi'n gallu digwydd yn de y sir yn ogystal â gogledd y sir rhwng y dau beth. So fysa'n dda cael cadarnhad o hynny. Ac yn ail, o'n i dyle bod, wel, fe gawson ni deep dive mewn i trochi gynt yn y flwyddyn, reit ar ddechrau'r flwyddyn. Ac un o'r syniadau wedi dod i fyny, a dyle bod cyllido trochi'n cael ei roi yn cydran 4 o'r fformula cydran sydd yn blank, basically, ond mae'n dweud ar gyfer blaenoriaethau gwella, sirol a cenedlaethol. A'r awgrym pryd hynny oedd bod hwnna'n lle addas iawn i cyllido trochi dod yn rhan o'r fformula cyllido teg Cyngor Sir Powys. Fysa chi'n fodlon ateb yr 2 a hanner cwestiwn hynny, sgwch yna?
Gallai ddod mewn fyna, please?
Who's that, sorry?
It's me, Marianne.
Marianne, and I've got Sarah also with her hand up. But Marianne, go on.
O, iawn, diolch. Ar y trochi, Cynghorydd Bryn, mae'r 100,000 sydd yn y gyllideb ar gyfer wythnos nesaf yn ychwanegol i'r grant y Llywodraeth. Ac fel ydych chi'n gwybod, mae grant y Llywodraeth ddim garanti bod y grant yna'n mynd i barhau bob blwyddyn, felly mae'n newyddion da bod yn y gyllideb. O ran y trafodaethau gathon ni llynedd, y bwriad yw edrych ar sut mae trochi'n gallu cael ei fwydo mewn i'r fformiwla, a dyma falle rhan o'r gwaith byddwn ni'n neud dros y flwyddyn nesaf yma, ond dyn ni ddim wedi gwneud ei hyd yn hyn, ond dwi'n cymryd y pwynt.
Allwch chi cadarnhau bod o i sicrhau bod yna gyfleusterau trochi yn y de y Powys a'r Gogledd ac...
Gallai i gadarnhau bod y ganolfan iaith Maldwyn a canolfan iaith Brycheiniog a Maes Yfed yn Aberhonddu hefyd, felly ac i gefnogi'r staffio sydd angen ar gyfer y ddwy ganolfan.
Oce, oes na broblem gyda roi'r funding na yn uniongyrchol syth mewn i cydran 4 o'r cyllido teg yma?
Bydd rhaid i gael sgwrs gyda Nancy ar gyfer hynna ar gyfer blwyddyn nesaf, dwi'n meddwl.
No, iawn, Bryn. Have you got more?
I'd like to come back later on with when I've formulated a question in my head.
No, that's absolutely. Come on, Councillor Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what's become clear for me from reading this paper is that I don't understand it. I have just booked myself on the school governor's training for finance. But I think what would have been helpful for me if we could have had a session beforehand to go through, this is the position now, this is how it works in, you know, school A, school B, school D, and then we could have seen a before and after. But I very much take on board Nancy's points. She's absolutely right there. However the formula works, it's just a system of getting money into schools. Once that money is in the school, it's up to them how they spend it. Absolutely correct there, Nancy. And I know you work very closely with schools to sort of manage their budgets. And Anwen is absolutely right. The changing curriculum means that the changing demands on that budget, isn't it, for the delivery at high school. And so I'm sort of somewhat pleased to hear that the funding review committee are supporting this. I have to bow to their expertise, but I'm just wondering how the previous paper is impacting here, because what we talked about in the previous paper is how perhaps the funding isn't supporting or isn't enough. You know, should you have a support worker or not a support worker and all the rest of that? Because I'm very aware, you know, if you've got a small school that perhaps got 15 pupils in a classroom, well, they are in a better position, aren't they, to support their ALM pupils than if you've got a school with 30 pupils in their classroom. So is the aim of this to try and balance that out? So I've got a couple of things. Have we taken into account those schools, and they are mainly high schools, with those huge deficits, and will this make any difference? Have we taken into account the ALN demands in our individual schools? And yeah, it would have been helpful, I think, to see examples of sort of before and after, because although we're saying for primary schools, somebody just said, sorry, I'm on a little bit of a roll here. You said that primary schools overall will get the same money. It's a neutral position. Individual schools, some will get a bit more and some will get a bit less. Now, it could be, of course, that they've been getting too much up to this point. So that could be the right thing. However, I think that should be in the impact assessment. Because if you're that school getting less, that's a massive impact. You've got a lot of work to do, haven't you, to put that right and to address that. So I think that definitely should be in the impact assessment. We need to be very aware of that. And those schools are going to need an awful lot of support, which is going to cost money, isn't it? I don't know if there's a question there, Chair, is there?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to Nancy because Nancy's had her hand up for some time now. I'm sorry, Sarah, you've also got your hand up, but I'll go to Nancy first.
So just to come in on deficits first, Chair, if I can. Obviously, we've got the requirements of the scheme for financing schools, as Councillor Angela will know, in respect of managing deficits. The picture around our secondary sector will be improved. And, you know, we are giving some really clear messages, working with our secondary heads yesterday. I attended secondary head teachers yesterday, along with Jane as Section 151 officer, around the proposals and the impact those proposals will have on their budgets, obviously once we fully finish running the formula, because there are other items to take into account as well every year. But actually, once we get to that position, then we will be working with individual schools to ensure that we've got balanced budgets, and we know that's more difficult and more challenging for those schools where we have got large deficits, and that is the case. But also some of the conversations that we've been having as officers with Dr. Richard and ELT is around what that in-year position looks like for our secondary schools, the level of deficit we require to be paid back, working within the requirements of our scheme, which allows for exceptional circumstances and longer periods of payback, which we do have to accept with a couple of our schools, and looking at then what that means in terms of what level of payback we expect, setting the deficit agreement that we've got in place on that, and then working around, does that leave anything for the school then in terms of a suitable level of payback with regards to their deficit, and then a suitable level of in-year position surplus where they are able to use that for self-improvement in their schools themselves. And that's largely been some of the challenges we've faced with our secondary sector in the past in terms of the different challenges that come forward from them. That's in terms of the deficits, Councillor Angela. And then obviously in terms of ALN demand, in 2024, the authority made a significant change to its funding formula around ALN, where the funding at that point in time was directed around extra funding coming in that was learner led, but in the secondary sector was based on smaller classes of 1 to 15. What we've got now is learner led across the sectors around ALN. And I know Councillor Gareth raised about different amounts and unit rates, but that the discussions we had at the time, they were the allowances. We've got uplifts in the FRM around those allowances, we've got inflationary pressures in there, and we're also recognising the demography around that. And we'll need to work with Judith as she works through all the ALN strategy and reflect on the ALN changes that have happened, and as ever, and as we have always done, reflect on any changes we make and look at any further proposals we may want to make to a formula.
Good. Come on, Sarah. I've kept you waiting for some time.
No, that's absolutely fine, Chair. Just to follow up on Nancy's point, really, around the changes that were made to the formula in respect of ALN 2 years ago. This financial year was the second year of the phased implementation. So it is really important that we let a change bed in before we can then look at whether it worked well or if there are further areas that we need to consider. Alongside that, though, during this year, the Welsh Government have been undertaking their own consultation on the funding regulations for school funding. And as part of that they were looking themselves at the deprivation element of the funding formula. So just to add in that we had to also wait for the outcome of that Welsh Government consultation, and they also have determined then in terms of deprivation they'll leave that in, but that we now have a choice of whether to use WIMD or EFSM. So there's a range of work that needs to continue to be done, looking at the review of the previous ALN changes, the outcome of the Welsh Government consultation, and continuing that ongoing work to review the changes within the formula.
Thanks for that clarification, Sarah. Councillor Bryn, followed by Councillor Jeff and then Councillor Angela. Councillor Bryn, your microphone.
Diolch yn iawn. Okay, cychwyn ffwr, na i darllen y dyfyniad byr yma yn Saesneg achos o ddogfen Saesneg wedi codio. The Welsh Government definition of the delegated budget says in the statutory position states that the delegated budget is crucial for schools to manage their own financial affairs and allocate resources effectively within the framework set out by the local authority. So my question is really, what is the fair funding formula, or the funding formula, to me is a crucial part or expression of the local authority's framework. Are there other aspects to the local authority framework that the school should take into consideration when spending their delegated budget? Because there are serious issues, and I want to follow up questions with respect to options, etc. That the schools cannot have an entirely free hand on how they spend their money once it arrives in the school. Surely it must reflect what is set out in the funding formula of the local authority.
Yeah, Bryn, yeah, it's a question that was asked in the pre-meet, and obviously in relation to the Welsh language, but also ALN and many other funding streams, which the school, once they've been allocated the money, can spend as they wish. So is that what you're driving at there, Bryn?
Absolutely, because whilst Anwen has explained the necessity of the ratios of forming for options, etc., if the school chooses not to use that money for that purpose, well, it has very severe implications for well, it drives entirely roughshod over the concept of equity in schools.
Okay, I'm going to go to Nancy because she's got her hand up, and Dr. Richard as well.
Just to come in on the Councillor Bryn, if I can. So I'm presuming the framework we're talking about for us is the scheme for financing schools, which all local authorities have, which sets out the relationship between the local authority and its schools. And actually that's guided by the schools funding regulations 2010. So obviously that's our overarching regulations in order to do to account for the different delegations we do. And where different things belong in terms of the education total budget. So for me, we've got the principles, which were based on model school principles. And I know Councillor Angela talked about the background of the formula previously, but this formula is built up on model school principles that were reviewed with the school community, both in primary, secondary and special. Once it gets to the school, then I think it's about, there are regulations governing schools over and above the school's funding regulations, obviously, but it's about the work then of IRIG's team, the finance team and HR in around the spending of that, the supporting of the school development plan. I'm going to bring Dr. Richard in because obviously it's on the education side, but we do work really closely on that in terms of having those discussions in our finance meetings with schools around what they are spending their money on and making sure it's value for money and the best outcomes for the learners ultimately. But I'll hand over to Dr. Richard if I can on that point.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. You covered actually what I was going to say in terms of the education service and the finance team working with schools. But there's another important part, which is that the responsibility of the head teacher to manage the school's finances, and the responsibility of the governing body, in particular the finance panel, to hold the head teacher to account for that appropriate spend and a spend in a way which allows the school to fulfill its statutory requirements. So there's a middle piece in that as well. So the overarching legislation guidance from the local authority, but that school level responsibility between senior leaders and governing body members and governing body panels as well.
I know you'll be keen to come back, Bryn, but there is an acceptance here, and our action is a recommendation. So if you could better, I'm only saying that, Bryn, because we're running out of time. Sorry. Yeah. So we can make a recommendation surrounding that.
Well, my recommendation is that the local authority. There's a few questions I could relate, but basically, the funding formula treats dual stream schools as two separate schools, and the schools, once they claim the cash, ignore the idea of two separate schools. It's really a bit an issue that there should be some comeback if the schools aren't behaving as two separate schools and they're transferring money from one stream to the other unnecessarily, which is no different from transferring money from one school to another. Um, there must be some comebacks from the local authority to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I know there is an inquiry underway, but I look forward to um, a response on that, because it's seriously impacting on the development of Welsh medium education in North Powys.
Point made.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind for recommendations, Councillor Jeff.
I'm with Councillor Andrew here all the way. We've been told there's winners and losers. We need to know what the winners are going to get and what the losers are going to get. And like Gareth has done it. I know it hasn't been verified, but if that's right, my local school is in one of the biggest losers. They'll be losing £61,000 with 58 kids, and there's other schools with 55 kids still going to be getting their 61,000. I know we're going to get some back through the capita, but what's that going to be, like 5-6 grand? And it's like we asked the question of this committee whether the formula considered additional costs around rural schools, and the answer come back today. The formula makes provision for top-ups for small schools to enable them to deliver their appropriate curriculum, and now they're taking that away. So I can't. We're in the budget now. I think the 7.3 million coming for schools. Well, do we really need to be taking this 180, 200 grand away? I don't think we do. But my recommendation will be the high school, secondary side, fine. The primary school, let's have a winners and losers church, or a real time on a real school, how it's going to affect them, and bring it back to us then.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to develop that question today. The report reads there will be a reduction in the primary phase small schools and or class size top-ups received by some small schools. Mitigations include case-by-case support via teams around the school and gradual implementation to reduce the budget shocks. So the report, Nancy, suggests that there will be losers. We're just concerned about that, and Councillor Jeff has raised his own school as one of them losers. But let's no minute, Jeff. Let's be clear that this is going to affect a few schools, and we need to be clear as a scrutiny committee that this is the way forward. Councillor Jeff, come back.
We've got, I think, 58 kids now. We've been striving to get to 61.
I really would rather, Councillor Jeff, that we don't discuss specific schools.
All right, okay, then. Okay, hypothetical school, which has been in a deficit, worked hard to get out of it, trying to have an open license to try and get more kids. We'd be better off losing 10 kids or losing 6 or 7 kids. We keep the money.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm going to come to you, Nancy. The other potential question surrounding this is those small schools will have the same costs as some of those larger schools, which will have them top-ups. So where's the equity and fairness of similar costs in schools, and just because they're below a pupil numbers, that those costs will be the same? Nancy?
Just to set out the context of the funding formula. So all teacher costs in the primary phase formula are funded on the same average teacher cost. That is leadership 2. So every school in Powys starts off with the same funding within their component 1. So within component 1 of the funding formula, it's based on a model school. So what we set out as Powys is that for every 30 pupils, it drives 1 class teacher's worth of funding. Okay, and what we do is convert that into an amount per pupil, those principles over administration, midday supervisors, resources and premises, and the structure of a school. Once that's converted into a per pupil, that's component 1. Every school in Powys receives the same amount of money per phase, no matter what size of school they have. Everybody receives the same amount in component 1. Component 2, obviously, we've talked about, which is ALN, which is learner-led in terms of TOVE data. But component 3 is where the top-ups come in and where these proposals are focused. And what the work of the group has done with officers is looked at for all the certain size schools under 180, what amount of money are they getting within component 1? So for a school of 121, the formula looks at what they're getting in terms of full-time equivalent staff within that for the classes. And then if the school needs to deliver the principles of the formula, which is 1 to 30 with class sizes and how they're set, they won't be pulling enough through that component 1 to be able to fund that extra teacher, which is, Councillor Gwynfor, what you were talking about then in terms of costs. But that top up provides that cost, that additional funding for them to be able to be funded on the same number of teachers as a school that may be the top end of that next multiplier of 30. So what it tries to do is it takes the principles, looks at what each school has been provided with in component 1, and then strips it back to class teachers. So if you are 31 pupils, our formula dictates 1 to 30, you need 2 teachers. The small school top up then provides that additional funding, because at 31 pupils, you aren't able to pull through enough funding in component 1 to do that. So what these proposals have done is they have taken away bandings, they've taken away a set amount per pupil in the class size, and we've looked at it on a pupil basis using that methodology. So we stripped it back, reviewed what we had in place before, and are now making these proposed changes. I have to come back to the fact that this is about the funding side of things. We do need to be really clear. There will be winners and losers, Councillor Gwynfor. That is from all our formulas, but it's about the work we do with our schools around that. And also some of the work that we did, which led to these reviews, was around looking at school balances and what in-year positions some of our schools had. Once we had a fully funded formula, that was really clear that there was some in-year surpluses for some schools that were very high. And that's why we undertook part of this work as our evidence to feed back into the formula review group. And just to touch on that, because we've talked about primary, but that is the same thing that we have done with the secondary as well, with the teaching and learning top-ups and the small schools top-up as well. Same principles. What are you getting in component 1 and what top-up do you require in order to meet those principles that are set out? And that's for up to 180 pupil schools in primary and up to 600 in secondary.
So and that's a phasing in of those changes over 2 years.
Yes, that's the proposal, Chair.
Right. Kath has put a timely reminder in the chat. We've got 4 minutes left. We are going to overrun, but I'm going to suggest we only overrun till another 10 minutes. We do need to respect ourselves and officers in relation to this. Kath, does the meeting time, does the Zoom invite allow us to go 10 minutes over?
The Zoom meeting can carry on. It is whether officers can remain, Chair.
Yeah, is everybody happy that we dedicate 10 more minutes to this, just to conclude? There's an awful lot we haven't asked. I appreciate that. Is everybody happy for 10 minutes more? Okay, so it's 5 more minutes of questions and 5 minutes for recommendations. Councillor Angela, followed by Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, so firstly, I just want to thank Nancy. That was an in a nutshell explanation of the system. I can cancel my training now because I've got it. That's fine. So if we were a hard business and we are saying that a class size is 30 pupils and Welsh Government are saying a small school is 90 pupils, we should have no schools smaller than 3 classes of 30 pupils each. So if we were a bus, we wouldn't run unless that 30-seater bus was running, and that would make it inefficient. But of course, we're not a business, and that's why it gets more complicated, isn't it? What I want to talk about on page 25, the resource implications, it's proposed that 1.8 million is going to be put into the pot to help fund this, and 0.5 million is to be funded from the closed schools budget line. Is that schools that have already closed?
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yeah, go on, Nancy. Dr. Richards nodding.
That is, Councillor Angela, that's exactly what it is. So we put the money into a closed schools budget line. If we don't use it, the money comes back out to schools at the year end in line with the regulations.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Is invest in it.
Yeah, and can I just check the 1.8 million, because it mentions the budget there, is that waiting approval of the next budget? We've got our budget meetings coming up now. So even though this is a proposal, it can't go ahead unless that's agreed by full council. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor
Yeah.
Angela, and we set
Okay.
that out in terms of the fact that it is subject to, in the end of the section of the section 151 officers' comments, is subject to council approval in February 2026. We've been really clear with head teachers about that as well.
So we've got to be really mindful about this, because from a school's perspective, 1.8 million in your pot for your schools is fantastic news, isn't it? But other areas of the council are going to be saying, gosh, what I could do with 1.8 million for potholes or whatever else, isn't it? So we really need to be absolutely sure that this investment into schools is going to make a difference to the pupils, don't we? We really, really need to know that. So I'll just leave that there for now, because I don't think we can answer that at this moment. But the one thing that I am very concerned about is in the consultation on page 28, 17 respondents out of all our schools. Now, I think that that is an issue of real concern. And I don't know that we can go ahead with this until we get to the bottom of why that is, because I was confused by how the funding works. Nancy, in 2 minutes, you explained it, and I've now got it and actually remembered that I did know how it works. But I'm wondering, were our schools confused by this? And if our schools were not capable of responding to a consultation that has such a massive impact on their budget, their ability to run, I just don't think I've got any. I think we need to do this again, and we need to have every school responding. We need to have the confidence that they understand how a budget works.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor. I'm just sorry to cut you short. Let's have a comment on the consultation, because we do share that viewpoint. And then I'm going to Councillor Gareth, and then I'm coming to Councillor James for a conclusion before we make some recommendations. Dr. Richard or Nancy?
Yeah, I think I'll come in there. I think Councillor Angela is absolutely right. We need to secure better engagements from our schools in this consultation. That's something we've actually discussed with the schools budget forum. There are, of course, head teacher representatives on the school budget forum. So those representatives will be speaking to their school colleagues in other forums. I think there would be a value in future years in delivering a professional learning session around how the formula is made up, so that we make that offer to our school leaders, to our governing bodies, so that we can have a much fuller response rate. So I think you're right in what you say. I think there needs to be extra professional learning into schools around this, but the forum have noted that as well.
Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from what Dr. Richard said, and also the Formula Review Group is made up of head teachers and chairs of governors. So there is input from schools and governors throughout the process.
Okay, Nancy, and then I'm coming to Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Angela. Just to raise on that and do my plug around members around the training. So, we have recently reviewed our training offer in line with what we said and what we do annually. And actually, although our overarching training offer included an element of the formula, we are now offering specific scheme and formula training. We've had good attendance from governors, actually, and we've had heads as well. So I'd really urge people to come on that training because the feedback I received was that it was worthwhile and it helped them to understand the complexities of the funding formula. Thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Sorry, Chair. Can I ask one question and make 2 points? The question is, Nancy said about the 500,000 being transferred from the closed schools budget. What's the total held in that budget per annum? Do you want to answer that first before I come with 2 points, Nancy?
Yeah, I'll have to come back to you, Councillor Gareth, because we've got various pots in there. And actually, in the budget proposals, we have used some of the contingency budget for the pupil movement, which we have now bid for back in the FRM. So we need to do a complete piece of work now within this budget set in the next month.
I just want to know what the base fee is for 26-27 before any transfers.
For the closed schools budget is just over 500,000.
Okay, right. Can I say, and I agree with that, you gave a very good explanation, but what it suggested to me is that the current model was wrong. It should never be imposed in the first place, using the lump sum basis for a range of numbers. Could I also suggest, Claire, that one of the recommendations is that we should have a member development session on the funding form, because you know, I know it better than most. I haven't got the full understanding I should. So I think we should have that both with all sections. And apologies, I got barking in the back.
Thank you. I think we're complete there now. Sorry to rush you, everybody, but I'm going to go to Councillor James now. Comment and conclusion is all yours.
Yeah, Chair, thank you so much. Really fascinating discussion, as stimulating as I expected it to be, and I've learned things that I didn't know about either. So, I think what's revealed is that, and I referred to an elephant in the room in my opening remarks. However you cut this cake, there will be, whilst we continue to cross-subsidise within the system to sustain a lot of relatively small schools, we are going to have this problem of inequity in the sense that the funding per pupil will vary quite dramatically. And this does inevitably play a part in creating the deficits that we see, particularly in the secondary sector. If you tot up the amount of money which is used to cross-subsidise within the system, I'm not going to mention a figure, but it is many millions of pounds. And, you know, if we had a completely equitable distribution across the whole county, I suggest we wouldn't have the deficit problems that we're facing. And let's not forget that schools operating with large deficits, it's the learners that are penalised by that. Those schools cannot do as much as they would like to do to improve the learning in their schools and maximise their pupils' potential. That's a fact. And I think from my own perspective, we've reached a tipping point where we are going to have to accept that continuing with this system, however you cut this cake and tweak the formula one way or another, without some fairly dramatic change in the network of schools that we have, we are going to run up against these problems for a long time to come, because there's never going to be enough money to actually, you know, fund a system that we have as well as we'd like. So I just think, you know, I think the discussion really has kind of revealed this, that there's this tension within it around how do we sustain provision, particularly in our most rural areas, and at the same time make sure there's enough money getting to every learner in the county to maximise their potential. And as we are, that there isn't. It's as simple as that. And however we tweak this formula, there's not going to be. So I think this to me, we've reached a tipping point whereby the sustaining of the current system is now becoming not so inequitable and producing poorer learner outcomes than we should be expecting, that really we have to grasp a very unpleasant nettle around schools and speed up the schools transformation process, something that I instinctively would not want to do, but think we will have to do, whoever is members of council in administrations to come. But really interesting discussion, and I really look forward to seeing the recommendations, because I think there's going to be some good ones in there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to draw this to debate and take us to item 6 on the agenda, which is recommendation. Officers, if you wish to stay for this, you're more than welcome, but obviously this will be formulation by the members of the committee. So if you do wish to leave, I thank you for your attendance today. It's been quite a meeting, a lot of talking, a lot of questions, and it's helped us to get to some recommendations which may help the authority in its approach to education at some point.
Would you rather I left chair as well, or
no, Councillor James, you may as well hear them. You'll hear them on next Tuesday anyway. So if you want to leave, that's not a problem. Right, recommendations. I really am rushing. I'm really sorry for that, and I don't want to miss anything. But if we got some recommendations, I've made a few notes. Anybody want to suggest some recommendations first? Recommendation, Councillor Brain, in relation to Trochee should be included in future years.
Yeah,
you have to make that.
Yeah, yeah, they should be part of the formula, and you know, there is component 4 listed as county and national priorities, which Trochee has to be part of that, trying to get 1 million speakers or whatever. So that's a fairly straightforward one, I'd have thought.
Yeah, okay, that's in. A recommendation in relation to reviewing premises and capitation allowances within the former should continue doing that. Would that be a recommendation?
Yep.
A recommendation in relation to I'm just trying to get the word equity for rural schools within the funding formula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And equity for Welsh medium, which is what we're trying to get at with the way that the money is allocated to schools.
A more immediate recommendation, Chair.
Go on.
And that is in respect to the primary sector. I was going to propose that we should recommend that the primary sector proposals aren't implemented, but I think what I would now propose is, because of the size of the impact on some individual schools, that the implementation of the fair funding formula proposals will not happen until April 27, and then they're phased in 50% in 27-28, fully in 28-29. By doing that, that will again give those schools affected time to actually plan their staffing structure for the future years. And a second recommendation is, I think we need a member development session on the fair funding formula.
Yeah, so we'll agree to the member development. I'm just going to go to committee now in relation to Gareth's comments there. It seems a sensible recommendation rather than saying that the authority should not proceed with the proposed changes in the primary sector.
I'll second that.
Yeah, but is Councillor Gareth's recommendation better?
Yeah, what he just said there, yeah. Phase it in.
So could you phrase it again, please?
Go on, Gareth. Just say it again, please.
Yeah, that we accept the principal changes, which I agree with, because I think the current formula is wrong, but the implementation is not done until April 27, with 50% of the change in 27-28 fully implemented in 28-29, which will then allow those schools that will be impacted by those formula changes, and that gives Nancy and her team enough time to work with those individual schools so they can actually plan a budget ready for the 27-28 and 28-29 years.
But I'm not 100% sure if I agree there.
Yeah. No, I mean, is it just for primary schools, or are you
just for primary? I think we fully accept the secondary.
The issue I have with that, Chair, the issue I have with that is if you are under the new formula a loser, to use a want of a word, it means that the formula thinks that you've been overpaid in the past. So if you've been overpaid in the past, you're probably overstaffed already, and that should be something you're already addressing. But I get Gareth's point that some schools won't be, so it does take time to adjust their staffing limits.
Yes, that's the issue, Angela. It's a timing.
So if we don't phase this in, then we are going to have schools potentially going into a deficit because they can't do anything about it because of the notice periods required to change your staffing.
Yeah. If you take a 55 pupil school, they most likely got 2.6, 2.7 teachers. They're going to have to reduce by a 0.5-ish. And they're not going to be able to do that by September unless they got a temporary contract they can finish.
Is the recommendation, tell me if this isn't strong enough, the committee recommended that any changes to the funding formula should include a clear and phased implementation plan? Or do we need to go with Gareth?
No, I'm happy with what you said.
That sounds good, Chair.
Yeah, that sounds good. I agree.
We need to understand.
The problem is that with the formula as it is, there are, if I'm right, there are still schools who could potentially suddenly find themselves losing money when their pupil numbers change.
Yeah.
So that's always happened, isn't it? Whatever the formula is, if you get a change of pupils, you're in that situation.
Yeah.
And that used to happen when you had class size funding. If you went from 91 to 89, you lost full teachers funding, basically.
Yeah. So this change in formula was trying to overcome that in part, wasn't it? So if we delay the changes, then we're also going to delay the positive impact of that.
Yeah, true.
Decision, please.
Chair, we haven't had one of my recommendations would be to run the proposed funding through the new formula to see the outcomes. We've seen Gareth's take on it. If that is what it is for a relatively small school, transition needs to take place, but that has a negative impact on the schools that are receiving the additional funding. The ones that receiving the additional funding might be in a deficit position already. And the ones losing the funding might be in a surplus position.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
Until you've seen until you run the formulas through and see the impact on the individual schools, it's really difficult to make that assessment.
So the recommended I suggested was a little bit bland, but it would address all of what you're saying now. So the committee recommended any changes to the funding formula should include a clear and phased implementation plan.
And traditionally, it's been a third and third and third, isn't it? But
are you happy with that recommendation?
Yeah, it seems to cover it. Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, as long as we have a recommendation around running the formula through the system and seeing the impact at the budget scrutiny round in February, whenever that.
Yeah, that's a good one, Alan.
So the recommendation that should provide detailed modelling of the impact of the proposed formula changes on all schools.
Not modelling the actual figures.
But won't that be too late? The Cabinet would have approved or not the paper next Tuesday, unless James changes the recommendation, so he waits for the outcome of that modelling.
That's the best way forward.
Does that usually happen, Gareth?
I don't know, because I've never seen a formula that's changed figures so much for individual schools.
I mean, we're talking about 180, 200 grand. Let's not rush here now. Let's get it right. Let's see the impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
There have been much bigger swings when the fair funding formula was introduced.
Yeah, but this is up to 20% on an individual school's delegated budget. I accept the point Angela's making it, but you can't correct the fact that the authorities overfunded some schools in the past.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and it's getting them time to balance it and get it right.
And why like there's a few losers, but they're losing big. It's like the lottery, you know. If you get 2 people winning, or you can get 10 people winning. The losers, they're losing big style. If the formula each one lost less, be different.
Yeah, it all depends where you are on that pupil numbers. Isn't it?
Okay, so
while we think about that, Chair, can I say that I would like the impact assessment to recognise that there will be a negative impact for some schools?
We didn't really discuss the impact assessments, but you did raise that, Angela. So yeah, I'm happy for that.
And so, sorry, I've also got to make a point that as I'm on the climate and just steering group, it needs to have a positive, strong point around climate and nature on it.
Gareth, you're breaking up there, and I certainly didn't hear what you said. So go.
Sorry,
run that again.
The paper needs to have a strong comment around climate and nature. As part of the climate and nature working group, we've been asked to make sure that all reports coming should have that element, and I'm surprised that hasn't been picked up by Cabinet, really, because what we got is pretty weak.
Please make that comment privately. We didn't discuss it in the meeting, so
okay. Yes.
No, please make the comment out.
Yeah.
We spoke about the consultation process.
Oh.
The authority reviewed the consultation process.
Yeah, I think we need to make a recommendation about how we engage our schools, because it's one thing if the general public don't engage in our own in-house consultations, but if our own staff, our school staff, are not engaging in a consultation that's put on especially for them, I think that's hugely concerning.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Angela. We spoke about learning sessions for head teachers and governing bodies, and also member development for local members as well. So yeah, that could be formulated into a recommendation.
Can we find out? Oh, sorry, Bryn. Dim ond un point bach. Can we? Are we in a position to find out which 17 schools did respond to that?
It's in the paper, Sue.
In the paper,
Sue. It's in the paper, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Unfortunately, of the ones that are really affected, only 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear the end. Well, I did. You spoke about equity earlier, about ALN and all that, which is great. And I tried to pipe up about equity for the Welsh language. I'm not sure if it got heard. There must be some form of oversight to make sure that the county in this situation is in the are amongst are on the good side. But they need to make sure that their endeavours to provide equity are actually carried out by the schools. Is a recommendation there's a continuous audit of how many GCSEs are sat in the Welsh languages or something like that, or A levels, to make sure that there is progress?
I think we can make a recommendation around equity. We did have an explanation in relation to the code surrounding that, and I suppose the recommendation is that we ensure that schools and governing bodies know the rules of the code and how the money is spent. I think that was the answers given. Yeah.
Well, we need to make sure the governing bodies do that. Yeah.
Well, I think Dr. Ritchie was clear. They couldn't enforce it, but he was very clear that we could remind governing bodies and head teachers of their responsibilities.
Well, if they can't enforce it, they don't need to fund it, surely.
Well, sorry, Bryn. The issue is once it's in the delegated budget, schools can choose to spend that money as they wish. The only way they could enforce it is by the authority removing that from the delegated budget and giving earmarked allocations and asking them then they would have to.
Well, I mean, something along those lines clearly has to happen then. Or there has to be some ring fencing on the of the budget that gets to the schools. I mean, they can't take ALN money and not provide any ALN education, but that it seems to be okay when it comes to the Welsh language. That is the problem. I mean, they must have some levers.
The difference.
Okay,
is,
let's not.
I'll talk to you out. I'll talk you to at the next meeting, Bryn.
Let's not continue the debate. Let's make a recommendation in relation to the responsibilities of governing bodies and head teachers.
Yeah,
this will highlight it to cabinet, and it'll certainly add to their discussions, won't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Champion, diolch Gwynfor.
Right. We just need a bit of clarity on the discussion which we had in the beginning in relation to that recommendation. And does anybody come up with some clarity in relation to that? There was a difference of opinion. Otherwise, I think we've got all our recommendations together. Or do we leave that recommendation? Everybody's gone quiet now.
Is that the one around the Welsh medium uplift?
No.
There is no Welsh medium uplift.
No, in relation to winners and losers in schools.
I still think your wording was fine, Chair.
Okay, if you think that's fine, let's go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Members, I'm sorry for rushing now. It's we're way over, but again, it's one of those meetings where we got too much substantive items. I hope we've given it due diligence, but I got extensive notes and we haven't discussed a lot of it, but I hope everybody's found it a suitable meeting. Okay, I'm going to leave the work program, etc., and close the meeting. And hopefully we've had a positive meeting, and we seem to have done a lot of talking, haven't we? So good. So thanks everybody in relation to all of that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.